Something's in your room. You can't move. You can't speak. It's a horrible, horrible feeling.
You know, you're looking out into the darkness and then you see a figure, but it's darker than the darkness.
I just get this like really creepy feeling, and I see this like shadowy, demon-looking figure in the front seat of the car.
She used to come into my room at night and stand right by my bed, and I just was petrified.
I remember I saw something fly by my bedroom window. We heard the bathroom door shut. So then we looked out my bedroom window down the hallway, and the bathroom door was wide open.
So we came around the bend and we saw eye shine. This thing stood up. I mean, it stood up, and it had high pointed ears. It had a snout, had a long arm, and it grabbed the deer.
What?
Okay, guys, I am super excited to welcome our next guest to Let's Get Freaky. We have got Justin from Cryptids of The Corn with us. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm living the dream. How are you doing?
I'm very excited to have you on the show, man.
So we talked off air already, and let all your listeners know this is my first sober interview I think I've ever done.
Whoop, whoop. I feel quite honored, man.
You should. I've been on big shows, little shows, everything in between, and I've been well intoxicated, I think, on all of them, at least a little cleared up. The only reason I'm not drinking today is because literally tomorrow is probably starting a 3-day bender.
Yeah, so you're saving yourself.
My wife, I said I was going to get it. I said I was going to pour a little moonshine in my lemonade here right before we came in here, and she just the look. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, that's it, man. You get that look that you know it's not worth going down that road.
No. And like you said, I'm from Cryptids of the Corn podcast. I do have a co-host. His name is Jay. He's a clone of all kinds of stuff. He is working tonight. He had to work tonight, but
we'll have to get him on another time.
Yeah. That's really rare for us both to be on an interview.
Okay.
Because he's been interviewed and I've been interviewed. Like, just because our schedules, like we record on one day, like we both make sure we have that time lot to be there together. And then after that, it's like, it's a lot of seeing each other in passing.
Yeah.
But he is my bartender, so I do see him quite frequently.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
I love your show. I'm a big fan of your show. And I was quite surprised because I've heard you on a lot of other shows as well talking. I was quite surprised that you get drunk while you're recording because I wouldn't have known that.
And like we talked off air, is I don't drink on my own show. We did that one time. It was the Hodag episode. It was so bad I almost deleted it, and then Jay said I had to post it. And it's got, it's almost got like 12 or 13,000 downloads or something now. I can't even remember. It's crazy. It's just like, really, people? And I'm known for being a drinker, and I'm not an alcoholic. I make that clear with everybody. When I drink, it's a lot.
Yeah, you go for it.
I'm bad with moderation. I could not drink for the next month. But it's when it happens. Well, I drink a lot.
When you're talking, you talk a lot better than me when you're drunk. Like, because, if I've had a drink, I'm no good at all. I mean, I'm not great without a drink, so fair play to you, sir.
Before the podcast and everything like that, I was a professional talker a little bit. I've done everything from child education, wildlife education. I was a fisheries biologist. I always put out the technical thing. I was a fisheries technician and a fisheries technician crew leader, which that's a big, long name. It just means it's basically a fishery biologist. I did habitat assessments. I did eDNA surveys. Everybody likes talking about the eDNA with Bigfoot and Nessie and stuff like that. So I did eDNA. I was one of the few people certified here in the U.S. for a long time, like one of the crews that did eDNA for some of the big contracts. And I'm trying to think, what else did I do? Endangered species surveys, impingement surveys, all kinds of stuff. You ever seen people shocking fish on TV?
Yeah.
That's what I did. I
That's
did all
cool,
the
man.
science behind it with it.
Yeah.
That is, the fish all go back alive besides gizzard chat because they're so weak. They just like pretty much disintegrate.
Yeah.
But the electricity does not affect the fish like it affects us. So they don't get knocked out. They actually
Okay.
swim towards the positive end of the current. So the whole time we're netting fish, they're actually still swimming, but their bodies are being pulled along the positive current line because the boat's front is positive electricity and the back of the boat's the negative current.
Yeah.
You touch that water, it sucks. Believe me.
Did that happen?
Oh, I've probably been electrocuted 300 times.
Jeez, man.
I worked with electricity, a lot of electricity in the water for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
The worst I ever got hit with was 16 amps. It takes 2 amps to kill you. I got hit with 16 because I fell off the boat and got tangled up in the positive end because of muskie. I don't know if you guys over there. You have pike.
Yeah.
So it's like a bigger cousin of the pike. They
Okay.
get massive here. So this muskie had actually jumped in the boat and knocked me out. And as all the other crew were watching the muskie, I'm going over the boat and I hit the positive end and I'm getting the whole boat shock.
Wow.
You will pee yourself and you will poop yourself. We tell all the new crew members because some of those kids will try to like hold it and stuff. It's like they're gonna get hit so hard one of these times. Just
Jeez. Oh man. So you say 2 volts can kill you and you had 16?
2 amps.
2 amps, sorry.
Yeah,
what?
Volts don't kill. They can, but volts are what hurts.
Okay.
Like, amps are what kills. So you can be a real, like most electricity is really low amp, high voltage to push electricity through and stuff like that. The stuff we're using is the opposite for our purposes. It's pretty high amp. But yeah, and it was because it was from a boat generator. So this giant, it's probably a 600-pound electric generator. And
Jeez.
I got tangled up. Normally when you're in the water, it's being distributed through the water. So you're not getting the full effect ever. The only reason I got hit that hard is I fell into the positive end. So the boat, it was easier for the electricity to go through me than it was to go through, a couple thousand gallons of water.
Yeah.
And it was only for a fractions of a second because we all have foot pedals. So when you step off them, the electricity gets cut off for safety. But still that fraction of a second. It hurt.
Man. I bet it did. Jeez, that's some dangerous work.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you don't really see young people doing it. Like once you hit about 30, you just kind of stop because it sucks.
Yeah, man.
Like put boats
very
in.
dangerous.
So one time, now I'm sharing stories. It's not even stuff we're talking about.
That's cool, man.
So we used rafts for some lighter work. And these rafts are on flatbed trailers. So like rubber rafts, like a Zodiac or whatever, like I'm sure most of your listeners have seen one of those. That's what we did, but it had electricity gear rigged out on it and a big generator in it. We had to put this boat in a cliff, like just down a cliff. And we were sitting here for like 30, 40 minutes trying to figure out how we do this. And we're calling our boss and he's just like, you have to do the site. You have to do the site. You have to do the site. So eventually we're like, okay, we'll do the site. So we ratchet strapped everything together onto the trailer. We pushed it. We hooked the trailer. We took the trailer off the truck, hooked it up to the winch of the truck on the front, and just pushed the boat off the cliff. And it worked. So we were trying to lower it down with the winch. The problem is the parking brake on the truck did not work. So we push the boat off the cliff, and it's probably only a 40-foot drop. And it's probably 70-degree angle. So it's not like a straight drop off, but it's, it's steep. And we push the boat off and then we turn around and the truck is just crawling towards us. And we're like,
oh man.
And we got in and obviously got it stopped and everything like that. Yeah, everybody get your parking brakes checked, especially if you're doing all the crazy stuff we did. No, but it was a lot of fun. But I couldn't physically do it anymore. I actually had to quit because I tore my meniscus in my knee, and it just physically I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, man. Obviously, you talk about your science background a lot on your shows and stuff. I didn't realize how dangerous it was, man.
Yeah. I wasn't a lab guy. I was only a lab guy in the middle. You see, there's 2 types. We call it clean biology and dirty biology. So I was a dirty biologist.
Yeah, you was getting stuck in doing the
I was
graft.
covered in muck. Well, here's one for you. I almost died my last year from disease. So when the big C came out, COVID,
Yeah.
summer, we weren't sure what we had to do and stuff like that. Nobody knew anything. And so this was actually, I think it was 19, the very end of 19. So nobody really knew what was happening. And I got super sick. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't so I kept going to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, you got COVID, you're just not testing positive. Okay. Well, you got COVID. I keep going back about every week. So this goes on for about 6-7 weeks. I got so weak and so sickly. She was my girlfriend at the time, but my wife now, had to set up chairs. The bathroom's only 30 or 40 feet away. And she had 3 chairs set up about every 10 feet for me to sit in and catch my breath to go to the bathroom. It'd take me about an hour to get there, about an hour to get back. I was so weak. And finally, I keep going back, and I'm just not good. I'm like nothing. So they send me to a couple specialists. And I go to, I can't say his name, but I love saying his name. I'll tell you off air, because he's actually a friend of my dad's.
Okay.
He's an infectious disease specialist, because nobody could figure out what the hell was wrong with me. And the problem is I raised exotic animals. I had super rare animals in my line of work. So I was exposed to a hodgepodge of just the craziest stuff. What it ended up being was the end stage of Vietnamese lungworms. Now, name's a little misleading. It's not because they're only found in Vietnam. They're actually found everywhere. The only race of people they actually infect are normally Vietnamese.
Really?
So he's like, the only way white people ever get this. So everybody at home, spoilers, I'm white. The only way white people ever get this is trudging through open sewage and stuff like that. You really gotta be, exposed to this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that whole summer, all I was doing is checking sewage outflows, to make sure they're not killing fish. So literally 16 hours a day, I'm in sewer outflows. So I was like, yeah, that tracks.
Wow.
They actually gave me the same thing they give horses, the same, ivermectin. It's for parasites. He didn't give me the horse one, but I flavor, and then felt bad for 2 days. After that, I felt like $1 million.
Oh, so it got you back pretty quick. I know that must have been a nasty.
He warned me. He's like, you're going to feel horrible next 2 days. Because what happens is, so what that drug does is it turns, well, partially what that drug does. I'm not a medical professional. I did fish. Partially what that drug does is turns your immune system up to 11, and it makes it start looking for stuff. So parasites mimic their host. So they mimic the cell sense and everything like that. So the immune system doesn't recognize them as a foreign body. What it does then is ivermectin turns it up to 11. So it starts looking at everything a little extra hard. And then your immune system starts kicking the butts to the parasites. What it also does is everything, every impurity, everything you have, it will kick out. So you're in the bathroom for about 2 days, and then you feel great.
Wow,
but it was
man.
the whole thing was about 14 weeks.
Jeez. So that could end, if that's not diagnosed and not sorted out, that could end
I probably
a
died
worse
in
way.
4 weeks.
Jeez.
Because they kept, and it wasn't my personal doctor's fault, but it was right. Nobody knew what COVID was doing, and they're telling everybody I had a fever, I was coughing. I looked like I had the flu, and I was so weak, and they're just like, we don't know.
Wow, man.
The coughing was the worst part. And what those Vietnamese worms do is you actually cough up their eggs. So they make you start coughing. But like I said, most people, as long as you're not Vietnamese, they don't bother you.
Man, that's some scary stuff, man. That's like that program Monsters Inside Me. You see that? Is that sort of thing?
I hate that show. It's a good show, but I don't want to know and everything.
Yeah, it puts you off going out, to be honest. I can get it from that.
I don't want to know. I just want to enjoy chicken. I want to enjoy beef. I just want to eat.
Yeah, for sure.
I just got that from water, but I got exposed to it pretty heavy.
Wow, man. And is that with all the protective gear on and stuff like that as well?
Yeah. So I actually I had a micro hole in my waders is what caused it when we did that. But yeah, I mean, it's just going to happen. But keep in mind, protective gear is only covering up to about your chest, and it's vapors in the air and stuff like that. Because we weren't on any, we've done nuclear sites, and we've done coal refiners. Coal refiners are probably the scariest thing to be under. Selenium and stuff like that. I can tell you off air, I can't talk about this due to NDAs. Selenium, all I can tell you is selenium is scarier than any other type. It's selenium is scarier than radiation. It's scarier than any other poison. It's the scariest thing, and you can't really test for it. And it comes from coal fire plants, or coal processing plant and oil plants. So there you go, buddy. If you don't swim downstream of one.
Yeah, man. Well, I've got to say, I'm glad I'm glad you got out of that and you're doing podcasting full time now. It's a lot more safer. And I'm glad. Man, I didn't realize the dangers that you were facing, man.
Oh yeah, I mean, he didn't make a lot of money. So after that, I went to a hospital and worked for a bit, and now I do this, like you said, full time. I made a lot more money at the hospital than they did doing that. And I just couldn't control people.
Wow, man.
Yeah, there's not a lot of money in it. You do it. Anybody that's doing that is probably doing it for passion.
Yeah,
they enjoy it, because a lot of my stuff that I did actually got used to change legislation. So,
really?
These big corporations and these little communities fighting for water rights and chemicals, and, big corporations are saying it's not us causing it. And then we'd have to, prove or disprove that. So our company, what I worked for, often got hired as the intermediary, so we already got our money. It really doesn't matter to us who wins. So it's just whatever the data says. And most of the time we don't know who is paying us until after. So what they kind of do is both of the communities will, because there's one pro and one against, whatever the thing is. And they kind of gets a third party contact you and, pay you to do the sites. So unless it's something really bad, a lot of times we didn't know what we were testing for, because that could sway the data. Obviously if it's something that may have radiation or something, they had to tell us that.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. So our job changed a lot of legislation. We actually got some large businesses shut down or changed practices. So it's good. It's a job definitely for the soul.
Yeah.
Because you see stuff like we did endangered species, like reintroductions and stuff like that. We actually found what's called an extirpated species. So we're going to talk about cryptids and stuff here in a bit. So what an extirpated species means is it's a locally extinct animal. It means it's not fully extinct in the rest of its range, but wherever you're at, it's fully extinct there. So the one we worked on was the Iowa darter, which is a tiny little fish. I mean, you'll probably fit 4 or 5 of them on your pinky. And we were in an area where they were extirpated. So don't let the name misfool you. Iowa darters, they're native to a large swath of land, but they're not really common anywhere. They prefer really clean water, and their crater lakes and glacial lakes and stuff is kind of what they prefer. So their habitat's pretty much all gone, but you get little pockets of them here and there kind of deal. So we were in this area where the government is like, no, they don't exist there anymore. We're still there looking for them, but they're like, they just don't exist. And I think it was the second to last site. We were there for like a month and a half. So when we go, we work every day and would work, the full time we were there, because we were traveling so far. So some of these sites, some of them were 18 days long. A couple of them were like a month and a half long, 40, 45 days long. And you're like, you're dead by it. You're dead by the end of it. So it's like the second to last. We're like a month and a half or whatever. We're shocking, and I see a little tiny fish dart, and I'm like, okay. They have a close cousin called a least darter. So I'm like, that's another least darter. I kind of look at it, and it's like, no, it's got some big spots on it. We show it, and ended up being an Iowa darter. So they got put back on the list for that area.
Wow,
so man. Seen there in like 70 or 80 years. And then the site after that, we found like 60 of them. Because we were so scared, we found the only one, because we had to pickle it. We had to preserve it and take it back, because believe me, they are not going to believe you. I don't care how many pictures you take. I don't care. They will not believe you it exists. So we're like super worried, like, we only got one, they're going to say, well, it's just the last one. The next site had a whole bunch of them. It was right down and it had really nice habitat for them. So we found a little pocket of them that are still thriving, and they actually start doing projects, and the population has grown dramatically over there.
Interesting, man. And the government said they're not there.
Yeah, they don't. The government does not want them to be there. An endangered species is a bad thing for business.
Yeah.
It's we wanted them to be there, but an endangered species slows down production. It slows down industry. It slows down, building homes, and it makes the rules a lot harder. So people will tell you when you're doing these sites and stuff like that, no, they don't exist anymore. They don't want them to exist anymore because then everything slows down.
Interesting, man. So do you think there's possibly a lot of locations out there that have got animals that should be protected that are not being protected? Wow.
Yeah. So extirpated. Here's the thing: is a lot of these animals used to have much larger ranges. So something we've been talking about on our show is the hyena phenomena here in the U.S. So a lot of people don't realize hyenas are native. They went extinct probably 50,000 years ago, but they're native to the U.S. So they're not extinct everywhere. We have hyenas, so they're extirpated. As long as our species is still here, the same where you're at in the UK and everything like that. You guys had spotted hyenas.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that. You guys had them a lot later than we had them. You guys had them up to, I think, around 12,000 years ago.
Really?
The French cave paintings depict spotted hyenas from the local fauna. So these animals that we kind of view as big African game used to just have a bigger range, and most of the time it was a lot of humans because they were big and scary, and we killed everything that was big and scary. And there was other factors to a lot of these species. But when you're not expecting, I guess that was my point. When you're not expecting to see this type of animal in this area, it quickly becomes a cryptid.
Yeah.
And so nobody's wrong. It is a cryptid. It's an undetermined animal, unidentified animal. It's just that when you go back 180 years or 200 years and you start looking and you start seeing stuff that was the local, for my part of Ohio, we like timber rattlers had been extinct for about 100 years and we found one. So if you told anybody around here that you found a rattlesnake, they do not believe you. You did not find a rattlesnake because, even these people in their 80s, they were already gone by the time these people were born. So the oldest members of your community have never seen one. So, but these species are really good at hiding. Anything that can be like that has to be good at hiding.
Yeah, man. That is so interesting. It's like obviously a bit different, but we got I know you've got it there as well. The big cat phenomenon, the black panthers that people see in the English countryside, and I've got a family myself. I think we spoke about it before that have seen a black panther 20 years ago in Essex, which is just outside of London in the UK. Interesting stuff, man.
So with the black cats here in the US, mountain lions. We have them. I didn't want to be this close, but I've been about 20 feet from a mountain lion up in the UP. I didn't know he was there. I didn't want to be there with him. He just was there. But mountain lion melanistic, so melanistic is an all black animal. That's a genetic trait, is like 1 in 10 million. It's really low. We have mountain lions in zoos all around the world. And as far as I did when I did my research on the episode, we've never had a true melanistic one in captivity. So that to me is very poor explanation for people saying like, they're seeing, all these black cats. And I believe they're seeing these black cats. You guys had personal family experiences when we've had them in our family. People, we had a guy, I've never shared the fit, but took a picture out of his truck, a semi truck, and it was just in the ditch.
Wow.
And he showed it. And it's just looked like a big black cat. I mean, it's obviously a big black cat. It's just, what is it? So to that point from earlier, true jaguars are native all the way up through almost Ontario in the US. So we think of them as jungle animals. And they do thrive in that environment, but they actually co-occurred with mountain lions all the way up through. Now, here's the crazy thing about jaguars. Depending on what population you're looking at, 1 in 2 are born black. So a mom can have a black and a yellow cup. And what some biologists believe the reasoning for this is to split prey drive or that kind of helps split food sources. So the yellow cubs may prefer to hunt more during the daytime. They're harder to see, stuff like that. And the black cubs are more likely to hunt at night. So the genetics that's phenotypical differences is what that's called. Phenotypes are just physical. Like when you look at them, they look different, but they're the same animal.
Yeah.
And genetic, genotype is a genetic difference. So they're still the same animal. It's just they have really different traits. If you look at a black jaguar, though, they do have other colors because they're not melanistic. Like if you get really close, you look, they have the spots that are a different shade of black, and they actually have some color, but they're just, that's when you're 5-10 feet from one, not across the field.
Yeah.
And then who's walking up on a 6-7 foot long cat anyways? Purposefully.
Yeah.
So what I think's happening with our black cat phenomena here in the US is that those jaguars are just retaking those roles. And the only reason you're seeing them, if you look at all these black cat videos from the US and stuff like that, it's always during the day. When there's a big black cat that probably got pushed out by a hunter or pushed out by something, it's in a field or it's in a corner of a field, it doesn't really want to be there. That's already 80% of the videos right there is they're in the middle of a field. Like deer here in the in the US, we have deer that get pushed out and they'll go stand in a field, because something bothered them. You don't see the yellow ones during the day, probably because you don't see them. Like they're there, they're just more camouflage. You're seeing the big black one that sticks out. So I think jaguars have also started, well, especially when mountain lion populations dropped, is they started taking back over some of those niches. And big cats are already super secretive and super rare and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I have a big cat researcher friend. I'm sure you've heard me share this story on my show, but for your listeners, I have a friend, close friend. She's a big cat researcher out in Colorado, Utah, that kind of area. She tagged an old female mountain lion and put a radio collar on it. Never found the cat again. She would get within 30 feet of that cat because everybody at home has a radio collar. She has the transducer. She knows right where that cat's sitting. And she could never see it to get another shot at it. And eventually, about 6-8 months later, the battery died and the cat's just, out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is already an older individual that's, animals don't get old being stupid. These ones have already put up with a lot of stuff. So he got shot once for a trank out, got a collar put on it, and was for sure never letting another human see it again. No human's ever going to see that cat again. You could be 5 feet from it. You're never going to see that cat.
Yeah.
When you look at a lot of mountain lion encounters, they're much younger individuals. There are a lot of, some of these people getting scared of these mountain lions are like 50, 60 pounds. And you're like, that cat gets 400 pounds. And, bobcats and stuff like that. I'm much more 50-pound bobcat than I am a 50-pound mountain lion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these things are, as you said, you're not going to find them if they don't want to be found. So that's why they're still so elusive and so interesting, man.
Now, do you want some paranormal?
Yeah, let's get into the paranormal. Can I just ask you, do you miss being in the field
every day?
In the science field?
Every day.
Yeah.
But with our show, we do the education side of it as well. And that's kind of where I get my fill right now. That's why I've even done it on this show a little bit. I pause and I kind of explain what words mean.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you do.
I hate when science is boring if you present it to be boring, or science is super exciting if you present it to be exciting. And science and the paranormal can go hand in hand. They don't
for sure
fight. It's just, So what I always hated growing up is biologists or scientists throwing out these big words and just keep moving. And you're like, well, what's that mean? And then by the time they've thrown out 3 or 4 more words. So I always try to stop like phenotype, phenotype is the physical characteristics, genotype, all those, because now you know something. So next time, my big thing is we've gone to a lot of these conferences here in the US. And I've heard people, and I will never name a name because it's just not my place. I've heard people say things that are just so wrong, but they use these big words. And they and everybody's like, okay, that's a word. It sounded kind of right. And Jay always laughs because I'm sitting in the audience. I'm like, no. No. And he's just giggling. And so I guess what I was getting at with that is that I try to do this, educate people. So now that if that person's talking to you is BSing, you're like, no, that's not what that word means. I know what that means. No, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
And I'm not a physicist or anything like that, but we try to get into some of that stuff, try the best of our understanding of how some of the, the physics stuff works. Because when you really start looking into it, there's not a lot of difference between physics and the paranormal.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah.
It's like one. So I got a present for you. I have never shared this encounter. This just happened at Mothman. I didn't want a new encounter. I haven't had an encounter since I was 17 because I'm very blunt. I'm a Christian, everybody at home. I pray over everything we buy. We'll get into some of the stuff and really explain why that homes me. I don't blame anybody for not being one, but for everybody's context and my personal beliefs, I'm Christian. So we're at our buddies. So we're going to Mothman Festival. Our buddy TJ, he lives like 10 miles from it. He's got this beautiful cabin right in the mountains. And he's just like, you guys welcome to stay here. He's a couple people come stay for Mothman Fest. Mothman Fest does like 45,000, 50,000 people a weekend. It's crazy. And it's fun. It's a lot of fun. If anybody ever comes to the US for Mothman Fest, that's definitely one of the ones I would highly recommend because you're going to get to meet a lot of the big names. It's a lot though. It's hard to buy stuff sometimes because it's a lot of people, but everybody's there. So, that's kind of the push and pull.
Yeah, I'd love to come to that one day.
It's a ball. Get drunk, I'll tell you that. The Mexican restaurant on the main street is the best, and I don't like Mexican.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So, where I'm like, sure. So TJ's, he's telling us he's had a couple of Bigfoot experiences on the back of the property. It's the middle of Wayne National Forest. So anybody that's listened to our show knows Wayne National Forest is super squatchy because it's just literally, it's weird because Ohio, thinking of a national forest in Ohio is kind of weird. You're like, we're corn. And it's real. It's real. It's got about 40 averaging missing people a year in it. And there's open mine shafts. There's, homeless colonies. Excuse me. There's all kind. Wayne National's a weird place. So if anybody tells you they probably had an encounter in Wayne National, I'd believe them. Because you go out there and you're like, I've been in state national forests all over the country. But there's just something about that one. Anyway, so he gets us up there and he knows how I feel. I don't like ghosts. I don't like any of that stuff. Not because I don't believe, because I don't want to experience it. I'm fine. I believe you guys. I believe everybody. I don't want to experience it. Because we've had some people say, like, Justin doesn't believe in any of that. No, I very much do. That's why I won't go to a haunted house. If I didn't believe in it, I'll go there all day.
Yeah.
TJ knew this, so he didn't tell me anything until I got there and unpacked my freaking bags. So this guy's cabin's 100, what was it? 1880 is when it was made. It's gorgeous. He's done a great job of keeping it up. It's, but it's still, everything's still original. And it's got a lot of history in it and stuff like that. And he's just telling us about all these paranormal encounters. And everybody, he's had like some of the big ghost hunting TV shows have actually been shot in his cabin. I can't name them on here, due to it's not my content, but some of the really big ones, there's a cabin in the middle of the woods on some of the really big ghost hunting shows. You're like, that's a pretty little cabin. It was TJ's cabin. So I didn't know this. I wouldn't have gone. I'd have paid for a $400 hotel a night. So he starts just laying into me about all this stuff. And he starts talking about, all the Bigfoots, the orbs and stuff like that. I'm like, that doesn't bother me. Then he talks about all the ghost activity and like stuff, all this stuff. I'm like, I don't like that. I may sleep in the car. Then he tells us about, there's no cell signal. Like we're out in the middle of nowhere. The only spot you can get cell signal is you walk up the driveway on top of the mountain and you stand at one spot and you hold your phone up, you can make a call. And he would do this all the time. He's like, he's a really big guy, so he's not really scared of nothing. And he's super sweet, but I was mad at him this weekend. And he holds his phone up. So he goes up one morning and he holds his phone up and he turns around and there's like a weird mist around his house. And through the mist, a little creature kind of forms on the roof. And he kind of describes it as kind of human or monkey shaped, no tail or nothing. And when it comes out of the mist, it looks like its skin is turned inside out. And it looks like a little demon crawling across his roof and disappears. I'm like, TJ, I'm going to burn this place down. So he talks to everything. and I think it works. 'Cause I think the phenomenon is just as scared of him as we are of it. Not, So he's talking to the house. So Jay ends up leaving the second night. He had to go back home. So it's just me and this whole floor of this very haunted place. He just told us hours and hours and hours of stories. And I'm talking to the phenomena. And I'm like, listen, I'll kill us all. If you're living in this house and you touch me in the middle of the night, I'll burn the house down. I won't wake nobody up. I can't do it. Don't touch me. Don't pull the blanket off. Don't do nothing. So I play a podcast. I downloaded a podcast down the hill and I came up with my phone and I just played that as loud as I could on the second floor. Because I'm like, I don't want to hear whispers because they talk about hearing whispers. So I'm like, as long as there's a podcast playing in my ear, I could be like, it was the podcast. TJ can hear me downstairs the whole time. And when I'm yelling at the house and stuff like that, you just hear him go laughing at it. I yell down the stairs. I'm like, TJ, I'm not joking. If it touches me in the middle of the night, I'll kill us all. I'll kill us all. And he thought I was joking. I was dead serious. So the whole night goes through. TJ wakes up at like 5 a.m. because he was a vendor. And, we were just there visiting. So he had to go get his stand and set up and everything. And I'm the only one in this house. The only one. And I'm like, this is when something happens. And I'm not going to be happy. So I come downstairs and I start packing up stuff. It's only like 7 a.m. So it's still it's kind of right at that point where it's starting to get a little light out. And I'm like, I can handle seeing a Bigfoot, but I want to wait till it's light out. So at least I know it's there. So I'll just kind of wait. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to the car because the car's pretty far away from the cabin. So there's like a long stretch. You got to walk through the side of this mountain and, go to the car. So I'm like, So there's like a little tiny patio before you leave. So I set my bags down and I open the first door and I'm reaching to open the second door and something on the other side of the door just sounds like it drops this gigantic rock. And I feel the rock hit and wobble a little bit. And I'm just sitting there. I'm still holding the door handle because it's all one floorboards. Like it's this house so old. I can feel whatever's out there just standing there. And I just close the second door and I sit down on the couch for about 10 minutes. And I don't hear anything. Like, okay, it's much more bright outside. I just got to leave. That's all I got to do is just leave. Like I open the door and I slowly open the second door and I just look at the patio and there's nothing moved. Like he had a couple little statues and a couple things. Nothing's moved. Nothing's missing. Like, okay. So I kind of go up and I try to peek and look on the roof to make sure that freaking skin demon's not up there. And he's not up there. And then I bolt to the car. And there's nothing there. There's not a rock on the porch. There's nothing. So I get to the car and I go talk to TJ later at Mothman. And he's like, yeah, that happens a lot. He's like, when I get home, I bet you there's that welcome sign on the door will be on the hillside. He's like, I don't know what does it, but every time we hear that thud, the welcome sign will be down there on the hillside. And it was, he went back. I wasn't going back.
Wow.
That's my recent experience.
Man. What do you think that was behind?
I have no idea. Because here's the thing is with the paranormal, I think a lot of these entities may be the same thing, putting on different faces for different people. So he's talking about all these different kind of creatures he's experienced and such. I don't necessarily believe they're different things. I think they may be the same kind of whatever the phenomena is.
Yeah.
And it's presenting itself in many different forms. So like we're going to talk about in a bit is the Bigfoot stuff he's experiencing is an actual Bigfoot or is it a thing that's taking the form of a Bigfoot for that period? He's also having orbs in these weird creatures and like big hoof prints left around the property and single hoof prints, just like one Clydesdale hoof print on the side, just randomly.
Wow.
And he's got pictures of all this. So there's a couple different ways of thinking about this. There's no correct answer right now. Like, kind of go John Keel's or something like that kind of way, that there's portal areas and all this stuff is all real stuff leaking out from other places. Whether you want to believe it's heaven, hell, interdimensional, space-time, doesn't matter. that just these creatures are pouring in from other places. The other way is kind of what I tend to lean more. I don't think that's wrong in some areas. I think for most of this stuff, though, that we're talking about is that the phenomena is one thing or one collection of things putting on all these faces. Putting the Bigfoot is the same thing as the orb is the same thing. And this is more when we talking about the Sasquatch that disappears and it walks into a tree, and the Sasquatch walks off a cliff. And because we've had stories on our Patreon and stuff like that of these Bigfoot. These people are following this, watching the Bigfoot, and it just keeps walking like a cartoon right off a cliff, never drops. So it's like a phenomenon that's being presented.
Yeah.
And there's really, when we start getting into the Bigfoot stuff, there's you can kind of put Bigfoot into two kind of categories for encounters. You have the woo and you have the non-woo, the flesh, very flesh and blood, and the very non-flesh and blood. And nobody's wrong. They both exist, in my opinion. But I think the woo stuff may be mimicking Bigfoot, or it's something about our perceptions. So all these people that have the red-eyed Bigfoots, the tall, skinny Bigfoots, a lot of times they go out hiking and stuff like that, and they want to see a Bigfoot. They're putting that energy out there. So if you run into something like the Fae or another phenomena that wants to communicate with you or try to communicate with you, it's like, okay, this is the face you want me to take. I'll take this face.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or we talk about some of the grays and stuff like that, the weird stuff they do. And they look like old earth spirits and stuff like that. So I don't think because it never stepped off the porch. I felt it standing there and it never moved. Like this house, you drop a pin, it's going to creak. So I'm not saying the Bigfoot's not stealthy. They obviously are very stealthy and intelligent. I don't think whatever was on the other side of that door was physical, or at least fully physical. And whatever it dropped, I don't think it really even dropped anything. I think it was it's hard to kind of explain. Not an illusion, but kind of a projected reality to where this thing, whatever this phenomenon is, whatever the source of this stuff is, wants you to experience stuff, and it's kind of putting it out there. But when you look, when you take the second look, nothing's moved, nothing's thrown, nothing physical has happened to create the experience you had, but you still had that experience. That's a very long-winded way of saying I don't know.
Do you think if you had opened the door, something would have been there?
If I did it right then and there, I do think so. And I think I ruined the game. Because there's always this almost playing nature with a lot of this phenomena. And the playing can be quite violent by our end. But it still is almost like people say trickster spirits, we got everything out west, cultures from around the planet have this kind of trickster deities, Puckwudgies in the east, and the Coyote Man of the west, and the Hyena Man of Africa are the same kind of. They're all the same thing when you really start boiling them down. So this is something we can't get away from in human nature, whether it's an attached spirit or a different race that lives on a different frequency on the planet, and their games may result in our death, but it's not that they're being quote unquote malicious. They may not understand us fully. They don't understand how our bodies are, but they want to have fun with us. Like a lot of Puckwudgie stories seem to be like that.
Yeah.
Puckwudgies will trick you off a cliff, but they don't do it because they're being, of malice. They're not doing it from ill will. They're doing it because it's funny. You're the punchline of the joke, which is still just as dangerous. You're still dead at the bottom of the cliff either way. But it's about trying to understand more about the phenomena. It's something that's different. But yeah, there's my long ramble for that.
Interesting, man. And that wasn't too long ago. If that was
recording this, it was 2 weeks ago.
Wow, that was really not long ago. Oh man,
the rest of it we'll talk about is like a decade and a half ago at this point.
Yeah, man. No, thanks for sharing that. We got an exclusive there.
Do you care if I go to the bathroom again?
Yeah, of course, man. Go. Yeah, that's fine, man.
Sorry about that.
No problem, man.
I've been drinking too much water today.
Getting ready for the weekend.
We need to be silent for a minute for editing, or how do you do this?
That's cool. We're just jumping straight back in. That's cool, man. So, where was we?
So, everybody at home, just so you know, I had to go to the bathroom. I'm very unprofessional.
That's cool, man.
No, so
That was really not long ago.
No, it's really, and I've had a big gap because I purposely avoided everything in my life. Because the experiences we're going to talk about here in a minute, I don't want anymore. I believe it. If you tell me you're abducted by aliens and I talk to you,
Yeah.
and I can see you, I believe you had your experience. Whether what it is, we can talk about all day. Because I'm not a believer that aliens are visiting this planet currently and abducting people. Not to say that they didn't have those experiences. I think it's a different thing putting on that mask as saying, we're Greys or we're, the Nordics or whatever, I don't think they're from Alpha Centauri or, Sirius B or anything like that. I think they're much more local.
Yeah,
but
they're from here.
You're still getting put in somewhere and you're still having a horrible experience. But for Bigfoot, and we've talked about Bigfoot. Now, I wish Jay was here because he's heard me tell this story, this encounter so many times. He keeps me straight on a lot of it. Normally, though, I'm pretty drunk when I'm telling it. So that helps. I didn't get out of order. So we're from Northwest Ohio. Our farm had the longest driveway in the county. The farm still exists. It still does. It's about a mile long. You couldn't see any of our neighbors really. And we owned a piece of the biggest woods of our county. So we don't have forest in our part of Ohio. The other side of Ohio, like Mothman is and stuff like that, completely different than where we live. We were just on a UK. We were just talking to one of our listeners from the UK. Ohio is the same length Ireland, Scotland, and England all combined from top to bottom.
Really?
And just to kind of put in perspective, because we had some of our UK listeners on. So Ohio is pretty much about the same size as the UK.
Okay.
So when we're talking about something on the complete other side of Ohio, that's how you can have very different geological, stuff. I'm in what's glaciated Ohio. We're flat. We look like Kansas. So anyways, Ohio, longest driveway, big woods, but we don't have forest in my part of Ohio. We have a lot of fields. And this year would have been, I believe it had been 2011 and 2012 were the 2 years of encounters with what we now know is Bigfoot. I'm spoiling it for everybody. Didn't know nothing. I was always wanted to be a biologist. Biologists don't believe in Bigfoot. That's a lie, but that's what's put out there. So the first year, now this is the problem is I try to remember everything on air. So we started having weird stuff happen. And I have 3 biological siblings and I have 2 adopted siblings. We all had our own animals, our own projects. I bred fancy poultry. When I say that, I had chickens. Some chickens were about $1,000 each. So when I say fancy poultry, I was winning at national shows and such.
Wow.
So I had dollar chickens too. Don't get me wrong. We had egg chickens and, I had a very small group of very high end birds I showed, like not professionally, but kinda. My mom had tons of goats. We had horses, we had the whole 9 yards. We had everything but a cow. And it was just because my dad thought cows are too dangerous to have with small kids, but he got kicked by a horse. So who knows?
Yeah.
So we start having weird stuff happen. First kind of things is stuff's getting moved. It starts with like 5-gallon buckets, shovels, that kind of stuff. And we have 2 massive pastures in this woods and, we have a lot of land. So this stuff would end up in the weirdest places and we'd fight about it because life was already hard. So why is one of our siblings making it harder on us by just moving all this stuff around? So we'd fight about that a lot. The next big thing we'd fight about is my dad had built, because we'd buy all these animal feeds by the pallet because we had so many animals, a horse, goat, and chicken feed. So what he did is he built these big bins that fit a pallet of food in them. So you just scoop it out. It had this giant heavy door on it to keep animals out. So I could open it by myself. My brother right under me could open it by himself, but everybody else had to have 2 people to open it because it was that heavy. So that was getting left open and animals were getting into it. So that's money and somebody being lazy. So we fought about that a lot. And what kind of the feed that would go missing and stuff like that was horse feed. I don't know if you've ever been around horse feed.
Not really, no.
So for you and all your listeners, and may have not experienced it, horse feed is an alfalfa kind of pellet. The binding agent is molasses. So it's very sweet. Even to me and you, it's very sweet. So to a horse, or an animal or a thing that can't get sugar very easily,
Yeah.
it's very sweet. So this kind of stuff, you just keeps happening. So the highlight of that year, like just all this stuff happens. And by the end of this year, we're like, there's a guy on the property screwing with us. We don't know why. We live in a college town, it's about 5 miles away, but we live in a college town, and college kids had destroyed farm property near us before. So it wasn't completely unknown, but this kind of prolonged stuff was really weird. So the big encounter I had in 2011 would have been this one. It was 4th of July weekend. We had a camper at the lake that was about 30 minutes away. I didn't get off till Friday night at 11. I closed it in the McDonald's. So I didn't get off till like 11 o'clock. I'm already tired. Everybody else is already at the lake. So I'd have to go home and shower, then go up there. And I've already missed the fireworks. So I'm not going to do it. I call my mom and just tell her, hey, I'm going to come up in the morning, So I get home, and our house, this is hard because this is visual, is like a U shape. The one end of the kitchen and the one end is the living room of the tips of the U's, and they're both all glass. The body of the house is everything else. So you come into the kitchen and you have to go all the way through the house to go to the living room. So you got to go start one end of the U and go to the other end of the U. So I get home. We have 3 dogs. We have my brother's service animal. He was a Labradoodle. He's about 130 pounds. We have Bailey, the dog. He was a Beagle Shepherd mix, about 40 pounds. And we have Clarice. There was a little Yorkie poo who is still alive. This story happened in 2011.
Wow. How old is she?
I think she's a ghost haunting herself. So let's see. We just did this. I think she's 18 or 19.
Wow.
She got no teeth, and we think she died 4 years ago, and her ghost just possessed her corpse. Smells like it.
Wow, man.
Hey, but yeah. So I open the door, and I try to let the dogs out. The dogs wouldn't even come into the kitchen. They were standing in the hallway, so they wouldn't come into the all glass room. And it was kind of weird, but I'm like, whatever, I'm tired. Close the door, and I walk through the house, and the dogs are following me pretty tightly. I go and I sit on the couch in the living room, so the other glass room, and Bailey and Clarice jump up on me with their little lap dog, so that's not weird. The weirdest thing about this is Sonny tried to jump on me. This is a service animal. He's trained. My brother has muscular dystrophy. He can't bump into him. He's trained. And I'm like, Sonny, what do you do? I yell at him, and he gets down and he lays right against the couch, right where I'm laying. And it's super weird. Just super weird behavior for him. Way off in the distance, I hear boom, boom, boom. 4th of July weekend. We don't have close houses, but there's houses around us, and everybody's lighting off fireworks. In Ohio, it's crazy. When it's 4th of July weekend, it's fireworks everywhere. So I'm thinking somebody's lighting off fireworks. I got 10, 15 minutes pass by. Boom, 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 a little closer. So I'm like, okay, somebody's in our woods lighting off fireworks. And on the other woods, a couple of older couples lived, and they had grandkids and stuff like that. They'd come in the woods on our property. It wasn't nothing. It was nothing bad. It just happened. So I'm like, somebody's got firecrackers or whatever, and, screwing off in the woods. 10, 15 minutes pass by. Boom, boom, boom again, a little closer. This happened several times. And I'm like, man, they're getting close to the house. So I call Nick. He's my best friend. He lived not on our woods, but down the road, and he'd be in our woods all the time because he had permission. So I think it's him doing something. I'm like, hey, where you at? He's like, we're out of town right now. We're not home. I'm like, oh, okay. There's somebody's in the woods screwing off. I can hear fireworks or something. And then it gets a little, so I hang up with him. He gets a little closer. Boom, boom, boom. This time there's a big dead tree right in the corner of our yard. You hear boom, boom, boom. Sounds like somebody's pounding it with a sledgehammer. I'm frozen. I'm in an all glass room. Whoever's out there can see me if I stand up. What's freaking me out is the dogs are dead silent. And Sonny has been a defense dog. He saved my mom from an attacker. He's not making any noise. And it's freaking me out. He's freaking me out more than anything. A couple more minutes go by. We have this giant barn. You just hear boom, boom, boom. All the animals freak out. The horses actually broke out and run around the pasture. So whatever and I'm so scared. There's guns in the next room. The gun cabinet's right 20 feet from me. I'm too scared to get up because I'm in an all glass room. I don't want whoever's out there to see me. And that's about 100. Yes, they're about 100 feet away from me right now. The last one was my brother had a project Porsche car. It's only 20 feet from where I'm sitting. It just boom, boom, boom. I'm shaking so bad. And the dogs are dead silent, dead silent, dead silent, dead silent. I'm basically crying at this point because whatever's just 20 feet away from me. Whoever's out there is 20 feet away from me. I'm a 16-year-old kid. And at this point, I weighed 80, 90 pounds. I was a tiny little kid for the longest time. I'm so scared of whoever's out there. At this very second, my aunt and uncle were living with us at this time. They came blaring down the driveway in the convertible, coming back super late from the bar. I come out. I'm in tears. They get the dogs and they grab me and we leave. We actually come to the house I'm living at now. It's my grandma's house. And I own this house now, but it was my grandma's place. So we come back the next day. Nick's dad was with us and Nick, and it's me and dad. And I'm freaked out and I'm telling him what happened and stuff. So a little background on Nick's dad. He was military, and then he was military police, and then he was SWAT, then he was detective. Now he does Red Cross stuff. He's like Red Cross. I think he runs like their blood drives charity stuff. So at this point, he has a very big background in law enforcement, everything like that. So we go to the barn and he finds the marks. They're about 9 foot off the ground, 8 or 9 foot off the ground, easy. And he's like, "Yeah, Bill, that's my dad." He's like, "Yeah, Bill, had to be a guy with a sledgehammer. And he hit everything 4 times." I was like, "No, he hit everything 3 times. It's burned in my head. I remember it was 3." And his dad was like, no, it was 4. My dad's like, "Well, why do you think it was 4? And why do you think it was a sledgehammer?" He's like, "Well, it's a sledgehammer because how high up it is. The only way a guy could reach that is, with a sledgehammer because they have a big, long shaft for him." And he's like, "It was 4 because there's 4 indentations up there." And dad just said, "I'm not going to argue with it no more." 4 indentations like knuckles. We found it on the Porsche too. And I don't have the picture anymore, but we had a picture. We found the same thing on the Porsche, 4 marks right next to each other. And he said he hit the Porsche 4 times. Like, no, he hit the Porsche 3 times. And my dad was just like, "Don't argue." So, hindsight's 2020. This thing was probably hitting the same spot 3 times.
Yeah.
But has knuckles. So when it was punching this, it was hitting the same spot. So the year continues and just more of the small stuff happens. Everything stops about October. It's just like a light switch. Nothing happens. Nothing starts back up again until about May. And this time, whatever's happening, this guy, at this point, we're 100% sure it's a man, starts coming with a vengeance. The stacks of stuff are humongous. Like they have car hoods and sawhorses and hay bales in them. And they're in the corners of our pasture and stuff like that. So there's a guy coming out on our property at night, moving car parts and moving, pieces of machinery and stuff like that in these piles everywhere. The bins being left open all the time. Horse grain keeps going missing. And it gets to the point where somebody stole one of my high-end chickens. And we don't know if chickens were going missing beforehand because, like I said, I had probably about 500 birds. But we had a lot of egg chickens. I had, probably 200 egg chickens. Am I going to notice if 4 of them are missing the next day? No. Am I going to notice 50 are missing? It's a little different.
Yeah.
4? How the hell am I going to know? These high-dollar chickens, though, were basically the same value as a cow. So I got them counted, numbered, and named. So they were in a completely closed-off electric fence box, and their box, the only way to get into it is having hands. You had to open the door, or the egg box to where the things were actually getting taken out of had a latch on it. You had to twist to open. So, and then it kept getting closed again after. So whoever was doing this was closing it back up. So one of those birds went missing. So we went over to the Amish and we got a guard dog. Her name was Lucy. She was a red heeler. They're the craziest, psychoest dogs ever. She did her job amazingly, though. Every night she'd patrol the property line. She'd force all the farm animals into the barns, enforce whatever was not in the barn, they're not supposed to be there, out. She was so good at her job. One time, deer got in the horse pasture, and she forced him into the barn. And we came up the next morning. There's all these deers hyperventilating because this dog wouldn't let him out. So this dog was nuts. This dog killed stuff. The one time we came home, me and my mom, Lucy's covered in blood, just covered in blood. We're like, the dog has to be near dead. Couldn't find a cut on her. There was 3 dead coyotes in the woods we found. She had tore up. This dog is just a monster. And people don't believe that part, or they've had a red heel and they're like, yeah, they're freaking psychos. In a good way. I mean, they're purpose-driven dog. They're bred for a purpose and they do their purpose extremely well. So Lucy would get in the habit, though. I guess one part I did leave out. This comes for the next part. My dad had installed stadium lights in the corners of our yard. Me and my mom showed horses, so it's easier to work a horse at night so they don't overheat. So my dad installed these giant big stadium lights that he got from the actual football stadium here in town. So my mom and me had a lot of light. So Lucy got in the habit of, if a raccoon or a coyote or a possum ran into the woods and kept going, she wouldn't follow it. Once you're off the property line, you're good. The problem is if they ran up that first tree. If they ran up that first tree, they never, to her, leave. So she'd sit and bark and bark and bark all night. So we got in the habit of having to go down there with a baseball bat or golf club and knock the raccoon or the possum out of the tree because she had to kill it or run it off. She had to finish her job before she could move on. So this became pretty often. Also in the woods, we had giant 4-wheeler and horseback trails cut into it. So they're just these big, vast holes just into the woods. So one night, Lucy's barking. And so me and Luke, that's my brother right under me, go get a baseball bat and golf club out of the garage. You know, it's been a pretty commonplace thing at this point. And we see where Lucy's standing and barking. And we're like, okay, we got to go knock this raccoon out. And she's standing right in front of one of those 4-wheeler trails. And we thought that's kind of weird because there's no trees. So we get about 30 feet away and I stop it. I said, Luke, stop. He'd already stopped though. And we just see it. These giant, massive chartreuse eyes just staring down at Lucy. 1 blink, staring at Lucy. 2 blinks, staring at Lucy. 3rd blink, staring right at me and Luke. Just looking at us. I just try to tell Luke, don't run. You know, walk. That lasts for all about 5-10 feet. We came in the house and we're bawling and we're, and I'm 17 and Luke's, my brother's, 16 at this age. So we're grown-ish kids and we're bawling. Dad's 100% sure this is the guy. He's standing there. We got him tonight. He gets the shotgun and he walks right to where Lucy's still standing there barking. He doesn't see nothing. And he's like, you MFer, you get out of the woods right now. I'm going to start shooting into the woods. And he's like, you scared my kids. You've screwed with us. We're done. I'll kill you tonight if you don't come out. Counts to 3. Nobody comes out. He aims into the canopy. So he aims at the top of the trees and he shoots about 10 foot in the woods. It just sounds like a buffalo is ripping through. And Dad kind of falls back, runs into the house. And all he'd say is, it's not a man. It's not a man. It's not a man. We didn't talk about it anymore. So we actually moved out of that house later that year. My mom ended up getting cancer and we had to give up the farm because it's just, we couldn't deal with both. My mom was the big driving force behind the farm. So when she was ill, she's in remission. She's fine. God bless. But at this point, we had to give up the farm and we actually moved into town. So we didn't talk about it for years. And we started watching shows like, and you can say they're goofy or whatever, but we started watching shows like Finding Bigfoot and, Mountain Monsters. And it showed us that other people had seen these things. Nobody had seen one around us. That's a lie, finding out with the show.
Yeah.
When we seen it, we did see the silhouette. So due to the way the light and stuff like that, its eyes weren't glowing. They were reflecting chartreuse. It was probably about 7.5 foot tall. So it wasn't, some of these monsters people have reported encountering. But we could just see the top of it. You see a big round head, no neck, and just these massive shoulders. This thing was just jacked. And it wasn't scared of us, obviously, until Dad had a shotgun. So when we talk about the physical side of Bigfoot, that this creature, whatever we ran into, wanted chickens to eat, presumably, and wanted that horse feed to eat, presumably, and it was scared of a gun. So those are all physical characteristics. It had hunger and it had fear of harm or death. So it wasn't scared of us till we had a gun and knew what, at least after the gun shot off, it knew what, it probably should be skedaddling. Doesn't mean anything against anybody that's had a paranormal Sasquatch encounter, but everything about mine is very physical. So this stuff being put up in the yard, now looking back on all the research we've done on Sasquatch, was some kind of territorial thing. some kind of thing trying to say, this is my claim now, and we just kept ignoring it. The thing with the dog, I think that dog was about 2 seconds from being not a dog. I think it was about 2 seconds from being dead. I don't think the Bigfoot would have hurt us, as kids. But that dog was stopping it for the last month of getting in that barn and taking whatever it wanted.
Yeah.
But I think this is the night it had, and there was other properties that had farms around it. So he could have been going around and getting everybody else's stuff just as well.
Yeah.
But this dog has blown his cover. He's done with it. And I really think he was about to squish the dog. We lived there about another month and a half. And after that, we had nothing. It went dead flat.
Wow, man.
Yeah. You got any questions? Did I leave anything out?
So, no, that's amazing. So at the time when this was happening and you saw that figure, was you thinking Bigfoot at that time?
I didn't believe in Bigfoot for another probably 2 or 3 years. I was going to be a biologist. It was the biggest fight in my soul because I knew what I seen, but I didn't. It was not Bigfoot. It couldn't be Bigfoot. I don't know what it was.
What was you thinking it was at the time?
I don't know because I wanted to be a biologist. I had all this, I was gearing up. I had applied to schools. I was doing all this extra credit stuff for biology. Biologists don't believe in Bigfoot. And I'll tell you a story about that here in a second. But so I had this fight in myself. And then when we started finding Bigfoot stuff and seeing that, it's changed. And I'm like, that's, and me and Dad and Luke end up talking about it. My brother Luke won't talk about it. My dad will talk about it. Luke won't really talk about it. And that's what we seen. So funny thing about Renee DeHinden from Finding Bigfoot.
Yeah.
We know her now. Good friend of ours.
Oh,
Super
cool.
nice lady. Craziest thing. First time we ever talked, she was a fishery biologist. I was a fishery biologist. She specialized in salamanders. I specialized in salamanders. Just different coast. So she was West Coast, I was East Coast.
Wow.
We had pretty much the same jobs, in the start. So me and her talked for an hour and a half about salamanders at this Bigfoot conference. Now she's a good friend of ours. She's super nice. But the life that we live is super weird because I would never talk about Bigfoot. And everybody looks at Renee as a big skeptic on the show because that's how the TV wants to portray her. It is a TV show.
Yeah.
She has to be the skeptical science on the TV show. Real life, she's the super sweet, super nice people. She's good people. But that seeing her on TV is what changed it for me. Even though on the show she doesn't believe in Bigfoot or is maybe open to the possibility, but seeing somebody that had a biology background and do this stuff and be like, it could be out there. It changed it. Now I did endangered species surveys. Besides seeing one, we can prove one pretty easily, or at least the possibility for one. So do you have anything else about that before I tell you about proof of Bigfoot?
Yeah, man. Can I just Renee? Has her opinion changed now? Does she sort of?
So I won't speak for Renee.
Yeah,
but opinion of Renee on the TV show and the opinion of Renee in real life are different.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's not my story to tell.
Okay. Yeah.
If anybody out there ever gets to a conference with her, just talk to her. She's and all the Finding Bigfoot crew. We know them all. We really know Bobo the least. There's a famous picture of Jay and Cliff out there. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I think I have. Yeah. Yeah.
McAtree's head and Cliff.
Yeah.
Jay didn't remember that picture. He was so drunk.
Oh, really?
But Matt's good people. Cliff's good people, and Renee's good people. And we don't know Bobo like that, but I'm sure he's great people as well.
I mean, it's an amazing show. That's something they all say themselves now, is that it was for TV. It was a TV show, even though
they'll tell you that all day.
Yeah.
And it's, and we know the Mountain Monsters guys too. Like Wild Bill. I just on the phone with Wild Bill like 2 days ago. You ever seen Mountain Monsters?
Yeah. Yeah. Great show. Yeah.
They're crazy. I love them. They're real people. And they did do real cryptid investigation. They did do, the show is fake, and people can get upset. We've had booths next to them. And some of their fans are just the most diehard. Everything's real on the show.
Yeah.
When Trapper got kidnapped and everything like that. And it's just like, people are real like that. But no, they're amazing, great, intelligent people. And there's the TV show and then there's them in real life. And, please, if you're anybody at home gets the chance to meet them in real life, meet them in real life. They're good, honest, real people, both shows. That's the ones we know.
Yeah.
As far as this new expedition of Bigfoot, we've only met Russ. That's the only one we've got to meet, and he's great. He did Bob Giblin's charity event, a couple years back. Like he posted it, so he's is good people.
But I think you said it on your show recently that obviously they're doing a TV show. They can't just put 40 episodes out of nothing happening.
Yes,
I think you said it yourself the other day. So they have to show something's happening.
If they showed you how it really is to do a Bigfoot investigation or Bigfooting or whatever, you'd have, like you just said, 40 episodes of nothing, and then you'd hear a weird noise one night, and then 40 episodes of nothing.
That's not going to do well on TV. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. And so all the eyewitnesses I know are real. All the places they go are real. And then, them getting 10 feet from it every time is, maybe the big fabrication.
Yeah.
But going for my life personally, not believing Bigfoot to begrudgingly believing Bigfoot, to then seeing Renee or somebody like Renee on TV and now knowing her personally is a weird life. I've lived a weird life.
Cool.
I'll tell you that. I'm very thankful. I've had a lot of help along the way. Nobody gets to that point by themselves. I'll just tell everybody that. If anybody tells you they got to where they're at by themselves, they're lying. Because you don't. You just, But with that encounter, like, I've never blamed anybody for not believing in Bigfoot. Because to the average person, it's a very unbelievable thing. You're telling me there's a 9-foot tall, hairy man living, and we're not talking about out in Washington, in these forests that are dense and you can't get through. We're talking Ohio, one of the most densely populated states in the country, or, Indiana or Florida. It's just like, there's a guy out there. It's 9 foot tall. There's a bunch of them. I get why it's hard. If you want, we could talk about some of the proofs for it.
Yeah, man. I'd love to get into that.
So I worked at a biology lab I cannot name, but we were a pretty well-staffed biology lab. We had people that did all kinds of jobs. Like I said, there's clean biologists, dirty biologists. The only difference is, so for everybody at home, a clean biologist, you ever heard somebody say that? It's a lab biologist. A dirty biologist is a field biologist. So it means you get dirty or you don't get dirty. It's pretty much the only thing. It's kind of a term we use to fight with each other a little bit. It's an endearing term. You're just we actually have a listener. He's a clean biologist now. He went from being a dirty biologist to a clean biologist. His name's Ralph. Ralph, if you ever hear this, we give him hell all the time about it. It's a big taboo in the field to go when you're this young to go being a clean biologist. No, he got a really good job opportunity, but he's our friend. So there's all kinds of jobs. The job that we're going to talk about is a caloritician. So some people, there's two types of caloritician. There's one you go to a doctor and he kind of tells you, what you should be eating and stuff like that for, whether you have a health issue or a weight problem or whatever. The caloritician I'm going to talk about is one that goes into an environment and an ecosystem and decides how many available calories there are on each level. So when we look at the pyramid of life, he kind of figures out how much available calories is in this certain area per level. So when we go in and we don't find species on a certain level, we know food's not the problem. We now know it's something else. So he has a very important job. He would go into these areas first. So I'm in the lab. I get made fun of all the time because now I'm full Bigfoot guy. I'm in this lab for like 3 or 4 years. I'm in the shop and I'm just talking about all Bigfoot's real and I've seen one and all this stuff. And some of the people are listening and some of the people are making fun of me and I just don't care anymore. Just don't care. Especially now, I really don't care. But this caloritician walks by and he just says, "You believe in that crap?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, Bigfoot's not real, and just leaves. Like, yeah, that's fine. About 3 or 4 weeks later, he comes up to me and hands me a big stack of papers. And I'm like, "What's this?" He's like, "Well, if they're twice the size of a black bear and they have a similar diet, here's how many of them could exist in the U.S." And he did all this work. It was and he said they had to be kind of migratory like elk. And we could talk about that in a minute too, because the word migration kind of throws people off in the Bigfoot community. So if the low end, he estimated 15,000 on the U.S. continent. On the high end, he estimated 45,000 on the U.S. continent, as long as they don't stay in an area for too long. That's plenty. So for mammals, 5,000 is the minimum for a healthy genetic population. And that's most mammals. Some mammals are less, some mammals are more. But that's about the borderline edge we look at for mammal sustainability populations. As long as they're migratory in some way, the genetic pool can keep being diversified with 15,000 animals. And I'm saying animal as in we are an animal, so I'm not derogatorying the Bigfoot, but, as far as we're talking about for this. So on the high end is 45,000. That's a lot of animals.
Yeah.
But not really. If I told you there's 45,000 African elephants on the U.S. continent and you had to find me one, you couldn't. And that's that's the biggest land animal we have right now. And I'm talking not in cages. I'm talking if you release 45,000 African elephants on the U.S. continent, we're talking Mexico, U.S. and Canada.
Yeah.
You're not going to find them. It's a needle in a haystack. It's like looking for a quarter on the state of Ohio. It's very hard to do. Now let's make them let's make them twice as big as a black bear and almost as intelligent as us, or whatever you want to put them. At least more intelligent than a big cat. You're not going to find these things. So that's that first thing, is that we have the calorition has proved it. There is a need. There is actually a niche open, at least from the outside looking in. There's a niche open for an animal of that type. So let's talk about black bear diet. So this is a big misunderstanding with black bears. Black bears and grizzly bears are completely different animals when we talk about their biological needs and their biological niches. So a niche for everybody at home is a job in the environment. So a lot like the niche, like an environment's a big clock and a niche is one of the gears. So that animal has to fit perfectly in its niche. Invasive species normally knock stuff out and that kind of stuff. So when I say niche, it's just a job. A black bear's diet is about 60% plant matter and about 40% protein. Of that 40% protein, less than 10% of that is big materials. So big game. We're talking whether it's a deer, a deer calf, or, a small animal or whatever. Almost all the protein from black bear diets come from bugs and come from frogs and other amphibians. So in Michigan specifically, I had a friend that did the gut surveys of black bears. That's a glorious job. He would have to take poop apart and kind of decide what they were eating. But he watched it, and these black bear, what they would do is just walk right up and down a creek and just eat frogs all day. And that's what they would do. And you're like, why would they do that? Is catching a deer easier? One deer, would you rather eat that or 100 frogs? It's all about calorie reward. So catching that 100 frogs gets you the same calorie as a small deer, the same calorie value as a small deer, but it costs much less calories to do.
Yeah.
So hunting and chasing down a deer is much more calorie expensive. So even though you're getting the same level of calories out of it, it's not worth it. That's why you look at black bears or look at other animals and just keep eating frogs or keep eating bugs. Because it's just like, he could. Not saying a black bear is not capable of doing that. They very much well are. But it's all about cost effectiveness in the long run. It's not cost, they're going to spend more calories trying to chase that deer down than chasing a frog.
Yeah.
So if we say Bigfoot has a similar diet, because that's what our diet roughly is as well, omnivores. As long as they're an omnivore with a mostly plant diet. When I say mostly, 60, 65% plant, they don't have to be hunting down elk. Not saying they can't. They very much well could. A 9-foot Bigfoot could, hunt an elk. But that is also very costly, and that's dangerous, even for the Bigfoot. Elk are not harmless animals. Herbivores aren't harmless animals. They put up a fight before they die. Elk, moose, and even deer. Deer can be quite deadly. So if you're this Bigfoot, even though you're capable of doing it, is it worth it? No, I'm going to eat a lot of frogs. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
As kids, we catch frogs and stuff. So there's all these calories available for these animals to exist. Now, the hidden factor, like we talked about, let's say they're just a little smarter than a big cat. Well, we've already talked about big cat experts having trouble ever finding a big cat again after they've seen it one time. On one of our episodes, we talked about the leading tiger researcher in the wild in China. She has been on, I got to remember this right now. She has been in her area researching tigers for, I believe it's 14 years at this point. She has seen a tiger twice and an elephant once. This lady lives out there.
Years.
Lives out there. I believe it's twice or 3 times she's seen a tiger. but she gets secondary evidence. She gets footprints. She gets signs. She gets, where tigers mark their territories. So she had actually had all these tigers named and ID'd by foot size, and markers. And she'd only ever seen one 2 or 3 times in this area.
Wow.
So tigers, before we talk about migration, big question we get a lot with Bigfoot is why don't they ever show up on trail cameras? The U.S. has 40 million trail cameras out there right now. It's deer season here in Ohio. It's deer season for most of the Midwest. So we have trail cameras everywhere. Why don't we get Bigfoot on these trail cameras? Well, once again, let's look at tigers. I try to do this a lot with comparing it to an example we can look at, kind of dissect. This lady doesn't have any pictures of tigers. She's got thousands of trail cameras out there. Not one picture of a tiger. And you know why? Several reasons. And sorry, I can talk all day.
Yeah, no, I'm loving this, man. This is super interesting.
Trail cameras to a herbivore don't mean a lot. They'll walk right in front of them. You get deer pictures on them, or even small omnivores and black bear. They don't really care. Not a lot of stuff's hunting them, and they're not worried really about hiding. Stuff can hunt a black bear, but it's not worth it. Also, we're talking about calorie reward. A mountain lion could kill a black bear, but that black bear could just as easily turn around and kill that mountain lion. So just not, unless there's a fight, there's not really a big worth. So the couple things. Trail cameras, what are their casings made of? Plastic. They stink. Not to us, but to an animal with a hypersensitive nose, they stink. They smell like plastic. They have, all these rubbers and metals in them. They're not natural. Even if you hide them, like people put them in logs and be like, why does Bigfoot see it in this log? He doesn't see it, maybe. It stinks. Second thing is the batteries in them. The batteries whine. The batteries actually make a noise. We can't hear it in our frequency of hearing. A lot of other animals, specifically big cats, can hear it. And it's like, if you're trying to not to be found by other predators or people, big cats are smart enough to know people necessarily are not a good thing to be around. And you hear over there, and that's not a normal noise. You're going to avoid it like the plague. The third and biggest thing for me is, do you know how trail cameras work?
It's of detection if something moves, is that right? And it starts
how to
filming.
detect it?
So if someone walks in front of it, or
there's a laser. There's an infrared laser that gets tripped, and it takes a picture. If you can see slightly into the infrared spectrum, like some of our big cats can, there's a giant laser coming off the front of this stupid thing.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to avoid people, and I'm still using big cats, if you want to avoid people, there's 3 big problems with trail cameras. They stink, their batteries whine, and they got a big laser that they can see right in the front of it. And not saying, when you see mountain lions on the trail camera, most of the time you look at them, and everybody at home pay attention. Most of the time they're juveniles. They don't really care.
Yeah.
They haven't had that negative experience. They can't communicate with their offspring fully. So they teach them how to hunt, and then they kind of push them out. Now, let's say Bigfoot has at least one of those 3 abilities. They can hear it, they can smell it, or they can see the laser. They have, in my opinion, and this is all opinion-based at this point, they have the ability to at least some kind of language. And whether it's very simple or rudimentary, or it's very complex, which I kind of lean towards a more complex language. They can tell their offspring, hey, you see that laser? Don't go there. If you walk in front of that, people come. And he's like, okay, mom and dad said not walking. I can see it, I can smell it, I can hear it. Or one of the 3. I don't go over there. I don't see that. Our whole existence is built around people not finding us. And we did a whole episode of, like, people are like, why don't Bigfoot killed? We did a whole episode on times Bigfoot have been killed. And they're all from the 1800s. And they were getting shot left and right when settlers came here. Because, and then, they got wise. And they're like, okay, people and guns are bad. They still happen once in a while, but yeah. Any questions about that before I talk about migration?
it's so interesting, man. Because obviously to us, the sensors, you can't see them, they're camouflaged. But as you say, to a creature with those abilities, they stand out like they really do stand out.
It's a big laser on the front of it. It's like, I kind of use it for the laser aspect. Turn a flashlight on and sit against a tree, and that's what they see.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see this big light coming off the front of something. So it's not natural. Anyways, the whine, if they have one of those abilities to sense it, and they're trying to avoid us. So
Yeah, man.
have animals try to avoid. Oh, I could talk about language or animals trying to avoid us. So I believe it was 2006, a unconnected group of lowland mountain gorillas. It was in this area. I haven't done this episode in forever, so I'm trying trouble. I'm drawing a blank. Everybody look this up. This lowland mountain gorilla in an area where there weren't supposed to be lowland mountain gorillas. This guy was taking people out on this mountain hike, and this big male silverback comes out. And there's not supposed to be any gorillas here. This guy was a guide in an area with gorillas, though, so he knew what to do. He told everybody, look down at your feet, kind of ball up, don't make yourself a threat, and don't make yourself a problem. This big silverback gorilla comes and checks everybody out. Everybody does this. So he's like, all right, nobody's a threat. Nobody's challenging me. And then the family comes out. And they were allowed to look and stuff at that point. The gorillas are very scary but intelligent animals. They have rules. If like the guide did, if you know what to do, they're pretty easy to be around for the most part. Not saying they can't rip your arm off because they get the whim, because they can. That population of mountain gorillas, if I'm not mistaken, ended up being 25,000 animals strong. But they wanted to be avoided. They were hunted for bushmeat for so long.
Yeah.
They avoided people forever. It took one gorilla and one man knowing how to do everything right. The gorilla came out and was calm, and the guy knew exactly what to do. And it showed him there's population exists. 2019, a new species of whale was discovered in the Gulf of Mexico, a cousin of the rice whale. This is a 60 to 65 foot long animal that doesn't shut up, and we didn't know it existed.
Wow, man.
Now, talking about whales and communication, so language, we've talked about Ron Moorhead before we came on here.
Yeah.
A good friend of ours, Ron, he has, the language analyze all this stuff. It's above and below human capabilities. So all the research he has, all the proof he has, is whatever he recorded was above and below human frequency. It has the characteristics of language, and it was not recorded on another device and then played. So it's 100% whatever he recorded was the first time it has been recorded. That's all he claims. If you ever talk to the man, he's great to talk to. That's all he claims. He is like, I've seen stuff, but I don't have proof for that. This is the proof I have. And here's like the U.S., like government personnel had proven some of the stuff he was saying. So with language, we look at animals and we don't connect a lot of intelligence to them. And that's our fault. That's humans wanting to be superior. Whales, for example, let's take humpbacks. Humpbacks have some of the most diverse language of anything on the planet, including us. So if you're lumping us in, this is an animal that we think's kind of intelligent, but we kind of put puppy dog intelligence to them. No, they're hyper intelligent. They're very intelligent. We've identified, I believe, of the humpbacks, 4,500 characters in their language. So a character for this would be a word to us. They have names for themselves. They have names for their family groups, and they have greetings for other members of non-related pods. And this is humpback specifically. So we've identified all this stuff with one species of whale. So this greeting, let's talk about that for a second, because I love talking about whales.
Yeah, man.
If you have these whales, so humpback whales, generally speaking, they're led by matriarchs. They're led by the oldest female, the grandmother. And that's kind of what whales as a whole of a species kind of do. Bulls are kind of pushed away. Most bulls and most species of baleen whales, so the big filter feeding whales, aren't hyper aggressive towards offspring of other bulls or hyper aggressive towards females. It's just they are bigger, and food for whales is kind of a big deal. So they go and feed by themselves so they don't exhaust food sources. It's more what we believe is what's happening, why they don't hang out with these schools. But the matriarchs kind of lead the family and protect the young and stuff. There's more reason for them to bunch up because they have more responsibilities. So matriarchs will meet from different family groups or different pods, and they'll go vertical in the water, and they'll lock fins and almost look like they're handshaking or dancing. So this is a whale greeting. This is a positive greeting when we look at them. So I believe it was 1999, this whale researcher, everybody look up the picture of this. He was a whale diver. He spent his whole time researching whales. He was swimming with a lone bull humpback whale. And he was goofing off, and he went vertical, and he put his hand out. Keep in mind, this animal is probably 70 feet long and close to 50 or 60 tons. And this man is about 6 foot tall and 200 pounds. So quite a different size. So this would be a mouse to you, so a very different size animal. And we have trouble recognizing intelligence in animals like that. So this whale looks at him. And to everybody's astonishment, it starts going vertical. And it takes its 22-foot long flipper and it gently touches the guy. So what happened here is this whale recognized another intelligent entity, recognized that this guy was trying to do a greeting, and then did its greeting, but it did it so gently because it understood the physical limits of the other animal. So we just seen a level of intelligence we don't even have. It recognized another intelligent entity. And I'd tell you another story if you want about that.
Yeah, man. This is fascinating. 100%.
I'm bad with whales. I'll connect it all back to whales.
I love it, man.
And then I promise everybody will talk about migration. So in 2000, and I believe it was 14 or 15, there's a video of this one as well. You can look up humpback saves couple. So another lone bull humpback whale was in about 60, 70 feet of water. And what these whales do is they live out in the open ocean most of the time. It's cold, it's harsh. Every once in a while, it's called whale spas. They'll kind of pick these areas and they'll relax. It's real shallow, and they'll kind of hang out for a couple days and just kind of chill. So this couple were diving, and this big humpback whale comes in. They're super excited. This whale was fine for a little bit and then started acting very weird. It started pushing these people with its nose up to their boat, and it was blocking it's using its body to block off the ocean. Everybody, they didn't know what was happening. And, a 60-ton animal, you're not going to tell them no. If they keep pushing on the boat, you're going to get in the boat. So they get on the boat and they start watching the GoPro footage back. They were being stalked the entire time by a 16-foot long tiger shark. Whoa. This tiger shark was actively hunting them, and the whale noticed it. So keep in mind, that tiger shark has never been a threat to that whale its entire life. From the moment it was born, it was way larger than that tiger shark. So it not a natural predator to that whale. It knew, though, it was smart enough to recognize a predator for the things it was enjoying swimming with. It kept placing its body in between the tiger shark and the people. Wow. And then when that didn't work, it would push them up to the boat and made them leave. They had no idea about any of this until they watched the GoPro footage back later.
That's amazing.
So was smart enough to recognize an external threat that it has never been a threat to it, act upon it defensively to save these two people. And you hear about whales and dolphins saving people for generations. I mean, we have 2,000-year-old stories of this happening. So I tell you all of this to show that it doesn't take a human to have a high level of intelligence.
Yeah,
so
man.
We have this thing with Bigfoot that it's either an animal or it's a guy running around out there. And it doesn't have to be. Bigfoot doesn't have to be a primate. I kind of jokingly say Bigfoot's actually a manatee. And I'll tell you about that later. But Bigfoot's a manatee, everybody. You heard it here first. Let's get freaky. Bigfoot's so you have all this intelligence. Now for the migration thing, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, man, definitely.
There's many types of migration. So people, when they hear the word migration in the Bigfoot community, they automatically assume weather migration, like we see with some birds. Bigfoot is not put off by the cold weather. Let's be quite frank. They're in Alaska. They live there all year round. It's not a weather migration. And that's the big cutoff right there, the big disconnect people have when I say the word migration with Bigfoot. Like, why would they migrate? They're not cold. They're fine out there. I 100% agree. Most of the time, migrations we're looking at with Sasquatch are most likely either food driven, so they don't exhaust food sources because they're big animals, they're eating. That's what whales do partially. They kind of hang out in an area. When food starts getting low, they move on. I think that's partially what's happening. And they revisit areas every year. And I think that's happening also. And breeding migration, you move to safe areas to have offspring, either to reproduce or give birth, especially if you're an animal that's really keen on not being found. This may be the only time you group up with other members of your species. whether you want to believe Bigfoot's single or lives in big family units or whatever. So when you look at this, in the Midwest specifically is where we did most of our research. I live in the edge of the Midwest, and in the Midwest, we have very harsh winters, very hot summers. We're a very weird part of the country. It seems like a lot of our southern Midwest sightings are in the winter, and a lot of our northern winter, or a lot of our northern Bigfoot sightings are in the summer. Now, you can say this is conjecture because there's not a lot of people in the north out in the woods in the winter. So how are they going to be having Bigfoot encounters? So that's one piece you could throw out right there. I personally think that they're food migrating. They follow the tree line, the mushroom line down, and they follow the spring line back up. They're not leaving because it's cold. And I think some stay year round in their areas up there. I just think they're following food sources. So if you look at our Bigfoot encounter, my family's Bigfoot encounter, we had the exact opposite, right? He started April, May, and left in October. Completely wrong for kind of our area. I fully believe what happened with our encounter was we have a family unit that would move through our area. And this was a juvenile, what I'm going to presume is a male, didn't want to migrate anymore. Well, didn't want to do it. He found this nice little woods that had all this free food, and he just waited for mom and dad to come back in the winter. And he got lazy. And, the second year is when problems occurred. We actually had two different people on our show that seen a Bigfoot within 2 miles of where I seen mine the same year.
Interesting.
Doing stupid stuff. And one was he was standing in the middle of a road when a guy was coming home at 2:30 in the morning. The other one, he was walking right through the middle of a field. And I really think that's what was happening is he was getting comfy. He was getting lazy because nothing negative had happened. And then, he got shot at by my dad. Not shot at, dad shot in the trees. But all of a sudden, all the fear is probably told by the parent units or whatever became very real.
Yeah.
And he skedaddled. So why is our county special? Because there was 8 other Bigfoot sightings that year. And we didn't have any before, any after. You look at the BFRO website. Our counties were the 2 biggest watersheds in our part of the U.S. meet. Well, the county I live in, Hardin County. That's the Ohio River watershed and the Great Lakes River watershed. Get 30 yards from each other in our county, and that's it. That's the only place in the country you can find it, is right here in this little spot. If you're not a watershed biologist, you would not know that because it's all creeks. So a lot of this, we believe that Bigfoot used either as maps or just guides to walk creeks to go places. Big thing here is our creeks are like 6-7 feet low, sometimes 8 feet below ground level. So if you're 8 foot tall, you can walk this thing and not be seen unless somebody's in the creek with you. We've had deer walk in these things and not know, be beside them. So I think that's what they're using these kind of areas for. I don't think they hang out here very long. We don't have a lot of cover. We don't have a lot of food. I don't think that Bigfoot hang out in our part of Ohio for any great amount of time, a couple weeks at max, and we have these big bursts of sightings and then they move on. I think he was the exception. And we had tons of sightings that year in our little part of the county because I think he got lazy and he was just doing whatever the hell he wanted to do, until reality sank back in.
Yeah. Wow, man.
Now, what do you think about all that spiel I just
I think that is super interesting. Man. The witness that you had on your show that saw a Sasquatch, similar sort of time, was it the same sort of size as the one you saw? Was it possibly the same one?
We both actually believe it was the same animal now. So here's a crazy thing. I'm moving my mic, everybody. I'm sorry. His name's Greg. Graduated with my dad. Known this guy my whole life. Never knew he believed in Bigfoot. He's a big guy. Never knew we believed in Bigfoot. We start this show, and he kind of hears it through my dad, and he's like, I tell your son my encounter. And dad's like, I never knew you had one. He's like, yeah, it happened in 2012. And he's like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, what road? And he's like, 2 roads from our house. Same year, same time, like literally probably about a mile away, 2 miles max. So his dad was actually dying in the hospital this week when it happened, when he had his encounter. So him and his sister were driving to the hospital like at super crazy hours. So this is like at 2 p.m. They're leaving to go to the hospital. They're on this road, and the farmer's cows are out. And if anybody listens to our show, you hear the intro when it just kept going and going and going. That part of the intro, that's Greg. That's his encounter.
Okay.
That's the him. And he's a big man himself. He's 6'5", 6'6", something like that. And he just talks about how big this thing was. So they were leaving. It's like 2 PM. There's cows out. The farmer, so he's like, okay. His dad actually ends up I can't remember if his dad actually ends up passing that day or something, but they don't leave the hospital like 2:30 in the morning. So they're driving down this back road at 2:30 in the morning. And he remembers these cows are out in this area. So he's got to watch out. He's tired. His sister's extremely tired. They worked a full day. Then they had to go to the hospital with their sick and dying father. So he's like, I don't want to hit a cow. I've seen a car hit a cow. I actually killed 2 people in our county about 2 years ago. If you hit a cow going 30 miles an hour, you're dead. I mean, they're big animals. So he's, going through. And in this little patch of woods, like there's open field. It's like a couple of trees when we're talking about this thing. It's not anything great. In the ditch, he sees this cow. And he's like, okay. And he pretty much is going to like 3 or 4 miles an hour. He's actually planning on stopping after and walking it back up to the house for the guy, so it doesn't kill somebody else, later. So as he's slowing down, and I wish, I could play it for you because he tells it so much better. It's his encounter. But basically, this thing, he's right next to it. As he's slowing down, it stands up, and it keeps going and going and going, and it's like 7.5, 8 foot tall. And he remembers the face, and he remembers the mouth. And his big thing is the teeth look like chiclets, which are big pieces of food. They're like big corn kernels, basically.
Yeah.
So that's why he's like, teeth look like big chiclets. And it's like the muscles. He's like, I could just think, he looked at it's about the belly button area is what he was staring out the car window. He said he could have touched it. It was so close.
Wow.
And he's like, I could just see so much muscle in here. He's like, he only really looked at the mouth and the belly button, pretty much. And as he was going, he's stepping on the brakes still. It stands up as the car passes. And it steps behind, it puts 1 foot on the road, and the second foot is in the grass, and it's gone.
Wow,
back in the field.
Yeah.
And he's so nonchalant. It didn't care. If anything, it was a little irritated that we even bothered the thing.
Yeah.
That's the same year. Same thing. I didn't see physical details because of kind of the way that casted the silhouette and everything. I see more of a silhouette. I 100% believe it's the same animal. It was so close, and we don't have a lot of cover. Not saying it couldn't have been a different Bigfoot. Now, the other famous one we have on our show is the farmer with the combine. So how me and Jay kind of got doing this podcast is we started a Bigfoot club here in Hardin County. It ended up just being me and Jay showing up and getting drunk. So we're like, might as well put a microphone down. And I'm doing all this hours of research to put I had a newsletter and I had all these events, and nobody started, we had a small group and people stopped showing up. So I was just like, whatever. So it's just me and Jay. So we're like, let's do a podcast. And we bought a little $80 microphone combo podcast kit. Anyways, when we were still doing the Hardin County Bigfoot Society, a guy, me and Jay were at the bar. He was bartending. I was drinking. I was being a good spender. This guy comes up, and he's one of the biggest farmers in our area. And he's a no-nonsense old man. And he used some colorful language. He basically said, you believe in that Bigfoot stuff? Much more colorful language. And we're like, yeah. We're on our Bigfoot t-shirts, everything. Yeah, yeah. And he's like, it's all crap. None of that's real. We're like, yeah, that's fine. We don't care. You say whatever. He's like, I did see something weird one time. And this happens, when people kind of lead into it. They hit you hard with something negative just to kind of see how you react. And then they'll tell you based on how you react. And he's like, I was combining at night, and you guys, I know you have combines over there. I don't know what size they are. We have some truly big combines, and they have pretty much stadium lights in the front of them. So I think some of our bigger ones are 40-row combines. So that's 40 rows of crop they'll harvest at one time. I don't know. Do you guys have any that big in the UK?
I'm not sure if as big as that, but we do have some big ones. Okay. Yeah.
I just so way people they look like spaceships going through the fields.
Yeah.
With all the lights and stuff. And when we harvest, we don't stop harvesting. So they're running during the day, they're running during the night. They don't stop because there's a very small window. The crop's good, from being just dry to do, whatever. So he's combining at night. He's found all kinds of stuff in his fields. There was one time a bunch of people planted marijuana in the middle of his field. Another time, and he just plowed it all up. And then another time, he'd actually found the college he talked about college kids destroying stuff. The college had made a disco like field out there. They put a bunch of plywood in the middle of this cornfield, destroyed a whole bunch of crop,
Wow.
all kinds of stuff out there, and he just plowed it all under. So he's like, I'm not a stranger to seeing weird stuff in the middle of combining. You know, he's like, I was combining one night, and this guy stood up in the middle of my field and took off running. And he's like, the weird thing is, the whole time he said a big black guy. It was very prominent. He kept saying a big black guy. And he said, the weird thing is the whole time he stood up and ran, I could see his shoulders and his head going through the corn. So for our part of Ohio, on a really bad year, corn is like 6.5, 7 foot tall. On a really good year, we have 10, 11, 12 foot plus corn. And so let's say it's more towards a bad year. Let's say the corn's 7 foot tall. That means that guy is 7 foot tall, a little bit below the shoulder, running through this field.
Yeah.
Big, black, naked guy. So I was like, what, you don't think it was Bigfoot? He's like, no, Bigfoot's not real. Like, do you think Shaq was out there, or like you think Shaq was in the middle of your cornfield naked, running through it? And after that, he really didn't want to say anything, and he just kind of left the conversation at that. And we've had that happen several times and that was the same year also. But we had this several times where people just want to get it off their chest and then they're done. They're not Bigfoot people. They just want to tell somebody that's not going to tell them they're crazy one time and be done with it. And that's what happened with him. I almost said his name. I almost got in a lot of trouble right there.
I took it out for you, man. Wow.
I've done it before on accident. And like, you'll hear me like, oh, there's editing. I don't like to edit.
No, man.
No, wow. It's crazy. And then I know I can ramble for hours. It's already like,
I'm loving this, man. I can listen to you talk Bigfoot all night.
But that's all physical Bigfoot. Everything we just spent an hour on is all physical Bigfoot. And like we talked about off air, the Bigfoot community can be so toxic to each other.
Yes. Yeah.
And we walk both lines. I think there's physical Bigfoot. I think there's metaphysical Bigfoot. We've had people come on the show talk about glowing red eyes and them walking off cliffs and not falling and disappearing into trees. I 100% believe those people. Those people are not lying. Those people had those encounters. It's just not what I seen. I fully believe the thing I seen was an animal, as much as we are animals. That it had physical needs, physical wants, and physical fears. You know, and you talk about some of these Bigfoot that get shot point blank and they just don't care. And you hear others getting shot and they drop dead. And I think that's the thing is, are you shooting something metaphysical or are you shooting something physical? I'm not saying that they can't be the same thing, that Bigfoot has both abilities. My personal belief is they don't. You have one set that may have some super animal traits, like infrasound capabilities and stuff like that, but tons of animals. We can talk about the suicide village in Africa that a bunch of people committed suicide because the elephants came back using infrasound too close to their villages.
Wow.
So a Bigfoot can cause you to commit suicide just by talking. But that's not metaphysical. We have real life animals that can do that. A sperm whale can liquefy your brain from the outside if it talks too loud in your direction, if you're too close. They don't do it. They're smart enough to know, like, I can't do this.
What can do that, sorry? What
sperm
animal
whales.
Oh, right, yeah,
Their whole big head, they're the biggest toothed whales. There's a resonating chamber. It's full of spermaceti, which resonates sound. It's like a disc of sound. They can actually cause permanent damage to your organs. And some biologists believe they can actually, if they were going full blast, would liquefy your brain and other things that are, because the sound reverberates your skull so fast.
Yeah. Wow, man.
Those are all physical traits that are super animals, but they exist. But this stuff of like morphing into trees, this stuff of Bigfoot turning into orbs or using orbs, I think is all real also. But it could be a different thing, or who knows if Bigfoot, they're all the same thing. But I think we do this with Dogman also. We kind of lump everything into one category. It's all the same. No, I think Dogman's several things that people are seeing, and it's scary. Don't get me wrong. That's the other thing is fear. Fear hyper exaggerates, and people don't do this on purpose. It's just something our brains do as humans. Fear gets hyper exaggerated as a memory. Our brains do it to help us learn from a scary encounter so we get more information out of it. But it's not truthful. Your brain lies to you like all the time. Like the duck experiment. Here in the US, we have tons of species of duck. We have mallards. Canadian geese are our most common. When you look down a pond, you see all mallards. When you look again, you realize there's 30 species of duck. Some are pink, some are blue. Like, but your brain painted them all as one color the first time because it's lying to you to make life easier. Now with the suicide village in Africa, so this African village didn't have elephants for a long time. Elephants were extinct in their area. They came back. Suicide rate in men was like 75%. It was crazy for a short period of time. They realized it was because there's two herds of elephants that were living on either side. When they would talk to each other, the infrasound, we don't quite understand what it does to our physiology, but we do know its side effects, like increased suicidal tendencies, depression, insanity, hallucinations. So these elephants were causing all these adult men to commit suicide. And once they figured it out, they moved one of the herds of elephants and they stopped. Like the suicide went back to normal. The suicide cliffs in California is a natural phenomena where this gas station had all these people that were supposedly healthy-minded people who would just walk and commit suicide after getting gas. Like they'd start filling up their car. It's real. You can look it up. They found out much later the actual cove and the waves and everything was causing infrasound to be highly intensified right there.
Wow.
So people that may have had depression tendencies but weren't anywhere near suicidal would have a spike off because they were getting hit with infrasound. You know, me and you, if you're not suicidal or you're not depressed by nature, you know, it probably would make you feel depressed. If you're already depressed, it way pushed you over the edge.
Yeah.
People, they moved the gas station, all this, and it stopped, you know.
Interesting.
But the metaphysical side of Bigfoot, it's real. People, Ron's seen him, like he had them talking in front of him and not being visible.
Yeah.
And not being there. But they were there, and they would, you know, you'd see these things on thermal, or not, they didn't have thermal, but other people see these things on thermal and they just disappear. And you have them in orbs, and you have Bigfoot with the UFO connection and all this stuff. It's all real. So this big problem in the Bigfoot community is that you have the woos and the non-woos, the natural creatures and the woos. And if you are going in with that mindset as a researcher and you get a call, nothing special happens. Let's say it's more like what my encounter was. But you're a woo researcher. That's very disappointing. You don't really care about that encounter because it didn't have any of your keynotes. Now, say you're the natural researcher and they tell you the Bigfoot had glowing red eyes. You throw it away immediately because these people are lying. They're lying to you, or they're at least so misremembering the data they have is worthless. If you go into it understanding both can be possible, it may be the same phenomenon or not, it opens up dramatically. This is even applied with the paranormal community as a whole. UFO researchers sometimes get Bigfoot stuff and they throw it away. They don't care. If their UFO is seen within proximity of a Bigfoot, they throw away the encounter because it's not what they want. If you go in, you're not a researcher, in my opinion, if you go in with a preconceived notion of what the result is. You're just not. You're not a scientist. You're not a researcher. If you go in wanting your result.
Yeah.
I have my own thoughts, but I'm open to anything. If you want to tell me Bigfoot's a demon, there's stuff out there that I can point to that's, it's very demonic. Or if Bigfoot's an alien, the extraterrestrial, we have some stuff to support that. Or Bigfoot's fully natural, we have some stuff to support that. I don't know. I have my opinions, but they're not set in stone. If you ask me what Bigfoot is, and here's my thing, it's changed probably every 6 months since I started.
Yeah.
Whether it's Gigantopithecus or a metaphysical creature or an early hominid that stepped off or Bigfoot's a manatee, it changes often because you should change your opinions with incoming research. It's okay. And that's the other thing is people pick these hills to die on. This is my thought I had in 1988. And this is what Bigfoot is. We've had so much information, so much stuff come forward, whether it's DNA analysis, we can talk about if you'd like. I did eDNA, I did that. And the stuff we've had so much, but people are still hanging on, and not saying that they're wrong ideas, but people are still hanging on to these ideas that were developed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. No other branch of science does that or should do that. Not saying that an individual scientist doesn't do that, but you should, with new information, your opinion should adapt and change.
100%.
So the Bigfoot manatee thing, a couple encounters that came out over a short period of time talked about dead young Sasquatch. And these are all within the last decade. I heard these encounters, and this idea is out there now, but when I first heard them, it wasn't. They were talking about the weird biology of Bigfoot, having extended lungs and stuff like that, because they cut him open. They were part of these. I'm kind of thinking, whatever. These guys were telling stories until they mentioned one thing that was so specific that only and not even most biologists would know this, was so weirdly specific that it made me believe they're both real. Both of these encounters are real. They talked about these young juvenile Sasquatch and their back teeth, their grinding teeth, would slide and lock into place like they were on a track. So they would pop into place, or you could push them out and they would slide on like a little track. These guys, both separate people, but both believe they were a designed organism, whether it was government or aliens or whatever. They were talking that because these teeth are sliding on a track on their jaw. What if I tell you there's one animal on the planet that has that system? It feels like if you have one of their skulls, their jaw system, it feels like it's on a metal track and it locks into place. It's the manatee. The manatee does that. So Sirenians, that's the manatee family group. Manatees and dugongs are the last living members of this. There used to be a bunch more. Sirenians are a really old, weird group of animals. They branched off into a ton of weird looking stuff. Manatees are just what we know today as the big Sirenians. They're the only other animal I've ever heard. So to me, as a biologist, or to me as even a Bigfoot researcher or whatever, when I hear that weirdly specific, I never can talk right. Specific, not Pacific, specific.
I do that all the time.
Detail. It makes it all snap back to me because it's so obscure. It's so obscure. Why would you say an animal had a sliding tooth?
That was from two different people, two different witnesses.
Really close to the same time.
Interesting.
So both these stories came out from different parts of the country at the same time, very close. The one I heard was on Tony's show, The Confessionals, great podcast. We all love Tony over here. That was way before I knew Tony. I heard that, way before. And I'm like, this, not Tony, but the guy who's interviewing, I'm like, this guy's full of crap. And you never know when you do this stuff, like, and any podcaster knows, when you have somebody come on and share their encounters, you don't know if they're telling the truth or not. You have no way of venting anything. How would you?
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, this guy's full of crap. And then he said that. And I'm like, that's so weird. Because I'm like, before I'm thinking, I'm like, I know there's an animal that has that, but I can't place it. And I'm looking. Manatees do that. 5 months later, completely out of my head, a different guy from a local event that's this old crazy man talks about a dead Bigfoot he's seen in the 60s. And I don't think he heard this on Tony's show. He didn't seem like that kind of type to me. Told this story about this, and they shot one, and they were playing with it and stuff, and its teeth would slide to a socket. And I'm like, okay. So to me, now, my personal opinion is the physical Bigfoot is a much older organism. I do not think it's a primate probably anymore. I think it's a phenomenon called convergent evolution. So not saying the whole thing of evolution is fully factual, but the species adapting over time. So convergent evolution means two unrelated or unclosely related species end up looking very similar. The big famous one's crabs. They even have a word for it, carcinization, which is things keep evolving into crabs. Crabs have separately evolved. The crab body plan separately evolved. I think it's 14 times itself in nature. So all these crab-looking things are not closely related. Like you have decapod crabs, and you have decorator crabs that look super similar until you look at their evolutionary history and you're like, these things haven't been related. They were shrimp-like things, or they were other, arthropods, and they evolved into this body plan because it works. The body plan works. A simpler one is looking at sharks and dolphins. One's a mammal, one's a fish. They both kind of do the same thing. Physically, their bodies are very similar. They do a lot of the same stuff, so their bodies end up looking very similar. Very different animals, completely different animals. When you start cutting them open and looking at them, they're not the same thing. So now my personal opinion of the physical Sasquatch is that it's an animal, it's a far step back that happened to evolve to look very similar to humans. I don't think it's a primate whatsoever. I don't think it's Gigantopithecus. Gigantopithecus was in the right place, right time. People don't get how big that thing is either. Gigantopithecus, if it could have stood up, the larger size estimates put them at 16 foot tall.
16 foot.
Yeah. So the big one you see, the model is, I believe, 11 foot. But that's the middle of the estimates. Some estimates put them at 9 foot. Some estimates put them at 16 foot. So if it was the biggest is what we think they could have gotten, we're proven wrong about that stuff all the time.
Is that's just going off the jaw, isn't it?
Jaw, teeth, and we actually now have hand fragments.
Oh, okay.
Using measurements of closely related species like orangutans kind of give us this idea. It's not foolproof by any means, but it's just a good idea. So for biologists or scientists being wrong, before sauropods, the big long neck dinosaurs, our biggest ones we thought could exist was 60 tons. That's the biggest an animal can get. You can't get bigger than 60 tons. We found one, a Supasumosaurus, I believe it was Argentinosaurus, which is just another big long word for a long neck dinosaur, was found at 64 tons, was estimated weight, the lowest estimated weight. Like, okay, I guess we were a little off in our math. The biggest animal could get to 64 tons. Except they were kind of looking at this Argentinosaurus skeleton, like it seems like a juvenile. So there's, it's either this one ages differently or the morphology is differently or we're off somewhere. They then find another Argentinosaurus that was 75 tons that was an adult. So it was 15 tons heavier than the largest land animal we could ever estimate. So stuff like that's off. We trying to put rules on biology is just wrong. It never works. So I can rant and rave all day. I told you, I warned you.
I love it, man. I have learned so much already. So you can keep going, sir. I'm loving this.
Where was what was I even talking about beforehand? This is what Jay's really good at, is putting me back. Jay's
where was we? So we had the crabs.
Oh, convergent evolution. Thank you. That's perfect. So I think Bigfoot, the current physical Bigfoot, could be something way older. So the joke is I say Bigfoot's a manatee because it has traits of super ancient species. Primates are relatively new on the field. So if you start, like, Bigfoot's eye shine, not eye glow, eye shine, is called the luciperculum. It's an organ that gives animals the ability to shine. To catch extra, I'm sorry, I got a text. To catch extra light into their eyes, and they reflect it back to see better. So that's that. Most primates don't have that. We lost that. Primates as a whole lost it a long time ago. You look at primates that do have it, they're mostly lemurs, and they're super ancient primates. Lemurs are very far, far back old primates. And some of them have luciperculum. Now, the jaw thing is another ancient trait of manatees. And like I said, the thing that manatees came from branched into all kinds of stuff, like hippos and whales and a horse-like animal. Like, it became a lot of weird stuff. So Bigfoot could be a manatee, convergent evolution. But no, I think it's probably a mammal, and it's probably something a long time ago kind of stepped off and looked like this. It started looking like us. There's even some lizards, like the monkey-tailed skink, actually evolved to be very monkey-like and have some semi-communalism. They raise their own, they have one baby and they raise their baby up. They have a family unit. So they're a lizard that nobody knows about. It has a family unit because monkeys were absent in their rainforest. So that niche, that job was open. So they evolved to take that job. Species radiation is what that's called. When these openings come up, one animal can become a whole ton of animals very quickly. And the theory of evolution is wrong, as in that the whole theory as itself is not correct. But bits and pieces of animals adapting very quickly does happen. Now, this paranormal Sasquatch, let's say that is all the same thing. It still could be a natural earth creature that has hyper evolved. So this is kind of a real fringe thing when we start talking about some biology stuff. This is the idea that some of these ancient animals start evolving what seems to be paranormal abilities. But the only difference, in my opinion, between science and paranormal is understanding. That's it. So some people talk about bees. There's an old thought that bees actually create anti-gravity in their biology. That's how they fly. There's no proof for it. There's no real proof against it.
Yeah.
We're gonna have an episode coming out on it, really diving into it, because it's the way, like, their wings beat, all this stuff is supposed to produce anti-gravity. Now that sounds insane, right? there's a similar system being developed in labs right now that we think will produce anti-gravity. That what they are saying that these bees have in them. But this bee report's from like, I think 1950 something. So way before we even started looking into this technology. And now the technology kind of mimics what they said the bees were doing and how they were doing it. So is that, metaphysical? Is that interdimensional? Or is it just an animal that has been evolving so long that they just evolved a new type of thing?
Yeah.
So bioluminescence is kind of crazy, but we kind of take it for granted because a lot of our animals have it. Phosphorescence now is something crazy as well. We now are understanding many, many more animals are bioluminescent to each other only. They can only see, like owls, for example. Big snowy owls actually glow green under certain lights. But to other members of their own species, they can actually perceive that glow. So in a pitch black forest, these two owls that are hunting in tandem can see each other perfectly, but nobody else can. Besides a member of their species, they can still hunt.
Yeah.
Sharks, we're finding more species of sharks. Platypus, for goodness sake, actually glow green. And that's crazy. It's a platypus. So there's all these little nooks and crannies in nature. Put nature in a bottle is the worst thing you could do.
Yeah.
Nature and life, as general, has been around for so long. It's taken stuff like cephalopods, squids that are hyper intelligent, whales that are singing, these all kinds of stuff. Sharks can sense electromagnetic, fields. There's even some animals that can mimic or manipulate their electromagnetic field. So if they can mimic their electromagnetic field, what's saying that evolution is not going to take that forward enough to where they can manipulate other electromagnetic fields? Example of that is we used to think these little spiders would shoot out string and they would actually make a kite and they'd fly. But the string never had a kite on the end. We just thought that the string had enough lift. We actually understand now they are negatively charging their web to glide on the Earth's electromagnetic currents. They're flying with static electricity.
Wow, man.
So what's to stop that from keep evolving?
Yeah.
Keep evolving. If they could get big enough to be these biological stuff. I don't know. What do you think about all of that?
Man,
I know
it's amazing. I have learned probably more than I've learned in any other episode, to be honest. It's been incredible. I mean, the natural world is so much more amazing than most of us think. I mean, there's so much more to it that we're obviously learning more every day. And, before we started talking tonight, we was talking before about the woo and the natural Bigfoot. What is it? Is it both? Are there different kinds? I've sort of, like you, my opinion changes every week. So I'm talking to different people that see it differently. And, 1 week I'm more woo, 1 week it's more flesh and blood. Before we started recording tonight, I would probably say I'm more towards the woo. Now, after talking to you tonight, I think I'm more flesh and blood, man. I think you've pushed me back to the flesh and blood.
It'll change in a month.
Yeah.
It should. Like we talked about, that's any healthy brain should change opinions with more information. With the more data you collect, the more information you get. That's what we're supposed to do. We're so afraid to say we're wrong. I'm wrong all the time. I've been caught being wrong. I'm wrong on stuff. It's human to be wrong. But what you do after that is what matters.
Yeah.
It's okay to be wrong, but have opinions. But when you get data, don't ignore the data. You can take it in. Like right now, I'm much more in the physical side personally. But I think some of the physical stuff can be explained by nature. Like lanternfish, for example, lantern hatchetfish. Everybody thinks their eyes glow and they glow red. How weird is that? They don't glow. They have bioluminescent organs around their eyes. They shine forward like headlights so they can see. And it's red light. So what if this red-eyed Bigfoot, this glowing eyes we see, is something like that? It's an evolutionary adaptation to have bioluminescence under the eyes that glow red to see in infrared. So they can actually, I'm a big believer they see in infrared. Yeah. And that's how they can move around our stuff. So what if that part of the woo, this big glowing red-eyed Bigfoot, is actually the same evolutionary niche or the same evolutionary adaptation that deep sea hatchetfish have? You can find everything already in nature. You can give me the weirdest thing and I will show you an animal. We don't talk about electric eels enough. We kind of take that for granted. There's an eel that we don't understand this. They can actually store electricity in muscle blocks. People will tell you we understand this. We don't really. And they release it in these giant jolts. It kills 16-foot caiman when they do this. So this is not a, that's magic.
Yeah.
It's an animal that shoots electricity out enough to kill something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the ironclad snail at the bottom of the ocean eats salt or like magnesium sulfite and stuff like that, and iron sulfite. They eat it and they push it out through their skin and incorporate it into their skin tissues. The ironclad snail. They are these big fleshy snails that actually have metal skin. If you don't know what you're looking at, it's an animal with metal skin. So why do we put limits on this stuff? Not saying the woo is wrong at all, but why do we have to say that the red eyes are woo or this disappearing's woo? Like mimicry octopus and some cuttlefish. So I always forget the species of octopus, but it's a type of mimicry octopus. They're known for being the best camouflage artists in the natural world. So this researcher was trying to stump one. He did everything from, making all. So the last time he made a pattern so complicated that the octopus had no chance of copying it. Just made it on purpose to be impossible. Just test the limits. He puts the octopus in the tank with us, and that's it. So the octopus has to hide. It's open. They feel threatened by being in open environments. So the octopus wants to hide. And you can see this octopus looking, and it's kind of trying some colors, and it's not working. So what it does next shocked everybody. It went invisible. It pulled all of its chromatophores fully shut and went completely see-through. The only thing you could see was the beak. So it did. So why doesn't everybody's like, well, why didn't the octopus do that with all the other patterns? Isn't that easier than trying to copy? No. So chromatophores are skin color cells that have muscles, micro muscles on them that they're all the same color. And you see all these octopus that make all these amazing colors. It's one little color cell that they're stretching and compressing to make all these different colors. So for this to go completely transparent is the full maxed out muscle stress. So they don't want to do it because it's very uncomfortable and it's very energy consuming. But if it's their only choice, they can. So now let's say Bigfoot has some kind of camouflaging mechanism like that. They can go invisible like that. And you're like, well, how can a hairy animal, we know they have hair, how can a hairy animal do that? So a lot of these people have witnessed Bigfoot having double coats. And we've had a lot of animals that have double coats of fur. So the outer coat is long and stringy and the inner coat's what's real. We have a couple eyewitnesses from across the country that have seen Bigfoot being red, like reddish color, walking through the sunlight. When they get in the woods, they stop and they almost look like they phase out of reality when they get in the shade. And this one woman seen this and she's watching the spot more intensely. And then she sees the shadow move. What had happened, in my opinion, is that the red-haired Bigfoot walked in the shadow and they actually have muscles on their fur, lifted the red coat up so you see the black coat underneath. So essentially changing the color of itself. And it was trying to trick the lady. Lady didn't buy it. So then once it moved, it looked like a moving shadow. But there's also light refractions. So you talk about these orbs. We have, you ever seen those? Well, first off, there's shields, like the turkey blinds we have here that are mirrors, making the person visible. We also have the government's working on some suits that actually reflect light up to a center point. So it actually reflects your reflection up and to a center point on top. So that could look, in theoreticals, like an orb of light. So you see this orb of light bouncing, you don't see anything under it. There could be a cloaked, essentially, Bigfoot walking under it. And what you're focused on is this big bouncing ball. But it all could be biological. We have this all in nature. There's stuff like this. Nature is incredibly crazy for what has come up. I mean, we have crabs that live in 700-degree water that eat sulfur, for goodness sakes. And we have animals, we have frogs that can be frozen solid for 10 years and fish that can dry up for 7. It's to put a limit on something is insane.
Yeah, man. Super interesting. So you said at the start there's a lot of biologists out there that do believe in Bigfoot. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. A lot of our Patreon members are biologists, zoologists, and virologists that are coming forward saying they just enjoy that side of the show. Is that, and the more we connect, it's kind of weird. Once we started putting it out there, and I'm not saying it's us, we started this way. We did not. But from my personal experience, once we started putting it out there, tons of biologists believe in it. But in their labs, they don't ever want to talk about it. They're you don't go against that because Bigfoot isn't real. So they don't talk about it. So when you start hearing, I'm a former biologist, I'm not a biologist anymore. But when you start hearing a biologist talk about Bigfoot and stuff like that, and they're like, well, that makes sense too. Everything I've said, for that side of it has made sense, makes sense as far as a biologist is concerned.
Yeah.
So not only am I saying Bigfoot's real and I'm a biologist, or was a biologist, I'm giving you lots of data and facts to back up that claim. You can't take anybody's encounter as law because you weren't there. I wasn't there for your stuff. You weren't there for my stuff. You don't know if I'm lying to you or not. The biology facts, though, you can go look it all up. It's all there. It's all there for you. So the more and more we did this, the more, I can't tell you how many conferences we've done, and zoologists and, all this stuff have come up and talked to us like, hey, we love the show because that side of it. I'm a biologist and I believe in Bigfoot and all that. So it's more common than you think, but I think that's any career. I think the biologists, it's a little more frowned on than that, because you're supposed to be looking into wildlife and you're saying that, okay, you're out there looking for this thing.
Yeah. But as you said, there's so much out there that we're learning every day. So we shouldn't discard anything. Anything is possible.
Here we go. If a freaking whale can just be discovered in 2019, like there's species, beaked whales. So you ever heard of a beaked whale?
I think I have actually. Yeah.
Sure. You guys are in the UK. You have visitors just every once in a while. Some species of beaked whale have only been seen one time, and it was a dead individual in the 90s.
Wow.
That's a whale, a tusked whale. So some of these beaked whales actually have really big tusk. That's kind of crazy. Everybody look it up. Look up a tusked beaked whale. You won't believe me. It's a real animal. You've never heard of it, and you won't believe me.
So interesting, man.
They've only been seen one time.
I mean, when you think of it like that, it changes everything.
That's an animal the size of a semi.
Yeah.
Been seen once.
I mean, as they say, I don't know the exact, but they say like we only know 20% of our ocean, our seas.
Here's a cool one for you. I got a good statistic for you. And maybe this will be the statistic we end on because we're 2:15 by my count.
Oh, man, yeah. But this has been awesome, man.
And we'll have you on our show, guys. So
I'd love to.
So of all species alive today and extinct, all species, plant, animal, fungus, bacteria, all species, it's estimated that we know about 1% of 1% of all species that have lived on this earth. 1% of 1%. If I'm right, that's 1 in 10,000th, I think. I think maybe I'm bad with math, that part of math. But we know 1% of 1%. That's all living animals we have classified, all extinct animals we have classified. All extinct plants, all living plants. Extinct fungus, living fungus we have classified is estimated conservatively of 1% of 1%. We know nothing about what was on this earth or what is on this earth. Every dive, like the big thing was like they just seen the golden orbs at the bottom of the ocean they thought were metal until they picked one up and it was a living animal. They look like big metal balls. I'm not even joking. They just did this like 2 weeks ago. First time they've ever been seen. Ever. Big golden balls at the bottom of the ocean. They grabbed one and it was a living thing. And they're like, because they thought it was treasure, they look like gold.
Yeah, man.
That's the ocean, and the ocean's one thing.
Yeah.
Discover new species constantly. But we're also losing species constantly. So here's a conservation thing for you. Take care of your wildlife. We're losing about 14,000 species of everything a year. Just humans. We live pretty roughly. I'm not saying you have to go completely green or nothing like that. Keep in mind, I'm going to keep eating beef and cows and driving my car. But there's smarter things to do. You can do stuff to help out. There you go. There's my kind words for you.
Man. Justin, this has been absolutely awesome, man. I have learned so much, and I didn't realize how long we'd been recording for. That
I didn't either, so I just
flew
looked up.
by.
My wife's been texting me like, you guys are still going?
What are you doing? Man, thank you so much. That was super interesting, man. Thank you.
Well, thank you. You guys have a good one. We like to stay magical,
Yeah.
because that's what you should do.
Can you tell the listeners where they can find you and your show?
I'm so bad about this. See, that's why Jay needs to be here. He's the plugger. All right, you can find us on all podcast platforms. We have a documentary series on YouTube, and we got the new one coming out in the next couple months. Instagram, Facebook. If you have an encounter and you want to get a hold of us, it's Cryptids of the Corn podcast at gmail.com. We have tons of fun. That's pretty much, we don't take ourselves too seriously. We like to say we're a scientific and magical thing combined. So you get a beaker full of sprinkles if you really want. But no, that's pretty much, you can find us everywhere. We do a Facebook live show every Tuesday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Because the Australians text me at 4 p.m. every time asking me where I'm at. It's like, guys, 9 p.m. our time. I love them to death, but the time thing is horrible. But no, that's where you can find us. We appreciate you, and we thank you for having us on.
Awesome, man. Your links will be in the show description so people can find you easily. Thank you so much. Can we end how you end your show with the big... Can we do that?
You count it. It's your show. You count it, and I'll scream.
Okay. I'll count to the 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Bye.
Bye.
Something's in your room. You can't move. You can't speak. It's a horrible, horrible feeling.
You're looking out into the darkness and then you see a figure, but it's darker than the darkness.
I just get this like really creepy feeling, and I see this like shadowy, demon-looking figure in the front seat of the car.
She used to come into my room at night and stand right by my bed, and I just was petrified.
I remember I saw something fly by my bedroom window. We heard the bathroom door shut. So then we looked out my bedroom window down the hallway, and the bathroom door was wide open.
So we came around the bend and we saw eye shine. This thing stood up. I mean, it stood up, and it had high pointed ears. It had a snout, had a long arm, and it grabbed the deer.
What?